Meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 27th, 2020 meeting. Questions or discussion, comments, changes?
I move to approve the minutes from February 27th. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda would be recognitions. Dr. Carpenter? Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Next item on the agenda would be public comment. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. So please, if you, come on up and just state your name. I'm just warming up here.
Madam Chairman, members of the school committee, and the members of the public here. My name's Seth Taylor. I'm from Chatham. I called Scott about a week ago and had asked to be agended. I guess we had a miscommunication, which is unfortunate, because I had hoped that we would be able to discuss this reason for my being here tonight, which is the Chatham COA facility, subsequent to closely in association with the vote that was taken by Chatham Town Meeting just last Saturday. And I thought it would be much more beneficial for the entire school board to be able to address this where it could be actively discussed rather than just receiving a public comment. I think that's unfortunate, but I think it's something that you're eventually going to have to get to, and I applaud that you do get to it and look at it again. But I don't want to enter into or engage in anything argumentative. That's not my point here tonight. The school board has a lot of work to do and a lot on its plate. I think one of the things that's important to me when I think about a school committee is that they restrict themselves to the matter at hand of educating our children and making sure that our children, that their educational needs are all being met first and foremost, and that they try not to engage in what sometimes in our larger community is viewed as judicial activism, when judges start to wander into areas that may be less of a concern for them than at first blush. And I think it's important in this issue to note that Chatham's vote on a simple matter of just reviewing the Stepping Stones property was 2 to 1 in favor of reviewing that. In essence, it was 300 to review it and 150 not to. That, I think, is a clear statement of the wishes of the people of the town of Chatham, and I would encourage this committee to do the very best it can to be a good, solid citizen on behalf of the people you represent, not just in looking after our children's education, but in recognizing the desires of the community. Further to that end, I think it's important to maintain some separation between you and the Chatham Board of Selectmen on this. I know that mutual bodies like to enforce and support each other. I applaud that, but in this instance, I don't think it's an appropriate issue. And I would caution, and I say this, I was not one of the principals in this discussion about the COA. I didn't become one of the activists either for or against this. I was given the petition to sign, and I signed it because I thought it was appropriate for the citizens of the town to be able to have their voice heard and to be able to provide that voice in a context which was meaningful. And so I spoke also at town meeting in that same regard, relative to my interests and concerns with the democratic process, and to make sure that the people of the town of Chatham were being heard by their elected officials in all matters that relate to their wishes when they speak them in such a forum as town meeting. And the caution that I would bring tonight is, and only because in my job as a criminal investigator for 25 years with the federal government, and my responsibilities to evaluate cause and effect, my job was to look way out in the future and say, if I do A, what's likely to happen between these disparate entities that are going to respond to what I do as action A, B, and C. And those evaluations are things that I did on a daily basis. And so I've projected forward to where this could become a real problem that I don't want to see happen. I don't want this to become so contentious in our community that come the May town meeting, in the most extreme sense of what I could predict could happen, is I could predict, again, worst case, the voters of the town of Chatham being upset with a school board that interfered if they thought they shouldn't be interfering. And I'll tell you, I heard a lot of people say the school board shouldn't be interfering with this. After I spoke, I had a ton of people come and tell me that. So that's my caution. And the caution that goes with that is, what could those people do if they reached a majority in town meeting? What's the worst that they could do? I think Scott understands what that is, because he's looking at me like he gets it. Worst case scenario, the voters of the town of Chatham could turn down the Monomoy school budget if they felt that the committee was being activist and engaging in or interfering with the process of what enough people in the town wish they weren't involved in. That's my caution for you this evening. And my wish that when you look at this stuff, that you reevaluate it, recognize that this piece of property is not something that is going to have a significant, if any, adverse impact on the middle school, the operation of the middle school, or the safety of the students who attend that school. And that you restrict yourself to those thoughts, and then contemplate what I think is the best judgment, which is to let the people of the town of Chatham evaluate this with the Board of Selectmen, and to advance their Council on Aging facility in the manner that is best addressed in some other venue than the one we're presently involved in. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other comments this evening for this portion? All right. Seeing none, we're moving on to reports and discussions, starting with Mr. West. I keep skipping over recognitions, Dr. Carpenter. Sorry, Mr. Westgate, one moment.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Might be the corona, I don't know.
I guess the intent, our intention, or at least my intention, was typically under the superintendent's report to kind of report out on sort of things that happened over the course of the last 2 weeks, that, particularly things that are late showing up on the agenda. For instance, coronavirus isn't on the agenda, but I think there's a lot of stuff that we need to kind of talk about and cover there. And one of the things I was going to talk about is just the vote that you shared that happened at the special town meeting. So I suspect that some of the community members might engage in discussion, but definitely no decisions are getting made. It's not a agenda item that we're going to be having any decisions made on. That's it for my little chime in. In terms of recognitions, I know per minute counts. I'd like to first and foremost thank some teachers who have just been incredibly flexible and out-of-the-box thinking. Yesterday afternoon, I stopped by over at Harwich Elementary School, and there were a bunch of teachers working, planning for what if we did have, for whatever reason, to close down for an extended period of time. And it was really nice to see teachers from Chatham Elementary School and Harwich Elementary School working together collaboratively to problem solve on a problem that none of us saw as a possibility, but I really appreciate how so many of our staff in each of our buildings are really stepping up to address something that is out there and ever present in the media. So thank you to all our staff, and it was great to see such collaboration yesterday. Second, I would like to thank the PTO, which donated 65 Scholastic gift cards for the Chatham Elementary School students to use to buy books at their book fair this week. Each card had a value of $15. And then we had the annual Read Across America Week that happened this past week at Chatham Elementary School and Harwich Elementary School. And I'd like to thank the guest readers that came into the classrooms to read to the students. These included town officials, first responders, town administrators, community members, and more. Joe Powers, the Harwich interim town manager, Larry Ballantyne, a Harwich selectman, Meredith Henderson, one of our school committee members, Corey Metters, Chatham selectman, Mark Polina, chief of police in Chatham, Andrew Goddard, Jessica Karen of the Chatham Police Department as well, Aaron Goshram and Keith Canali and John Larrabee of the Harwich Police Department, Justin Tavano of the Chatham Fire Department, Leanne Smith, Justin White, and Christina Reagan of the Harwich Fire Department, Teresa Malone of Monomoy Community Services, Kristen Kibblehouse of the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, Karen McPherson, a community member, Katie Cutter, a Harwich PTO president, Holly Tavano, our Harwich Elementary School nurse, Mark Smith, our curriculum director here, Melissa McGuire, our director of student services, Jim Birchfield, our director of technology, and Dr. Millen also read to the kids, and I had a wonderful time reading to the kids too, and breaking out the Sneetches this year. I'd like to thank the Harwich Elementary School families and students and staff for their overwhelming support at the Harwich Elementary School PTO Fun Run on February 28th. I think when last we were meeting, they had the donations or the pledges going up over $30,000. They ended at $45,922, which include pledges from 65 community businesses too. Last year we raised $34,000, so this was a huge increase. This brings us to a total of $80,000 to help offset the Harwich Elementary School playground build. And then lastly, I would like to thank Nancy Boyles, who donated a copy of her new book, Classroom Reading to Engage the Heart and Mind, 200-plus picture books to start SEL conversations to Chatham Elementary School Principal Millen.
Great, thank you, Dr. Carpenter. And now, reports and discussions. First up, Mr. Westgate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Westgate Teachers Fellowship Fund Committee met, and this year we'll be funding two teachers. One is Sarah Peters, Latin teacher at Monomoy Middle School, who participated in a 2-week Latin immersion studies program with teachers from around the world in Montello, Italy, called Scolae Estivae. She has very few opportunities for speaking Latin in Chatham and or Harwich, and welcomes the opportunity to do that. She'll also visit Roman sites, and thanks to the generosity of a Chatham resident, David Parker, who has contributed $1,000, we were able to fully fund her request of $2,750. Second is John Dixon, who will go to Rwanda with a group of educators led by Carl Wilkins, whom some of you may have met. He's been here twice, interacting with the people who have rebuilt trust between Rwandans. And if there's an example in the world that's worth looking at, Rwanda has to be at the top of the list. The group will be led by Mr. Wilkins, who's the only American who stayed in Rwanda, in Kigali, the capital, during the genocide. John's experience there and his firsthand knowledge in reconstituting their country will add another dimension to his exciting global studies program and a better understanding on the issues of how to rebuild trust from a period of turmoil. We'll reimburse John's expenses up to $3,000, the largest grant we've actually made to a single teacher since we started in 1988. Given the impact of the coronavirus, we will reimburse their expenses either this summer or, if need be, next summer, 2021. Both teachers are required and are actually happy to make presentations in public, in the libraries or elsewhere, sharing their experiences. And it's John's hope that he'll be able to lead a global services program trip for students to Rwanda, similar to the one that he led to Tanzania in February of this year, some year in the future.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Westgate? Comments? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sounds wonderful. Next up on the agenda, ELA curriculum adoption.
Oops, sorry. They don't bite. Not tonight. Good evening. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment for the district. So I have some of our task force members with us, with me here as well today. So Elise Johnson-Dreyer, Megan Lampert, Aaron Cronin, Katie Cloney, and then, as I've mentioned before, Mary Oldak was on the team, as well as Robin Millen as well. So when I was here 2 weeks ago, I gave you a bunch of the background information, shared with you sort of the process that we had gone through, a lot of the data that we had looked at, and to come to a consensus decision about going forward with ARC Core as our product pending a site visit to see it in action with the district. And even though I may have put a misspelling in my presentation, I am accurate, or I did promise to deliver on scheduling that meeting and getting back here on time, and I did do that, so I'm shooting 1 for 2. So anyway, so we're going to share with you today what we found and give you some additional information, and obviously be available for additional questions. But we were able to schedule a visit and visit the Henry J. Winters School, which is a K-4 school in Pawtucket. K-5 school. They're made up of 402 students. Student demographics breaks down 100% free and reduced lunch. Their racial population 35% white, 32% black, 25% Hispanic, and 7% made up of some percentage of students that are multiracial, some students that are Native American or Alaskan. And then, let's see, the interesting about this school is they're not actually in their school. Their school the facility is a failing facility. So the plan is for that building actually to be raised and a new one to be built in its place. And but it wasn't, the condition of the school was so poor that they had to leave the school. So the town owns an annex building which is an old Catholic school that the town purchased a while ago. So they're in this annex building while their school is being constructed. And then as far as implementation in their school, their K-2 staff is in the 2nd year of implementation with this product, and their 3rd grade was in their 1st year of implementation with this product. And their school is made up of about 40 educators. This is just a schedule of what our day looked like while we were there. They were unbelievably gracious. We brought about 10 or 12 people. It's a pretty disruptive group into a school that's already cramped for space. Like the conference room that we sat in, we couldn't even all fit around the table. And that's really the only space they had even for us to meet, to have some conversations. But that you can see, we broke into 2 groups. Each group got into a kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade classroom. We had some time in the beginning to talk with the leader of the school, to talk with the representative from the company, get a layout and help us understand some of the things we were seeing. And then we had a nice debrief at the end with those folks, as well as they were able to free up one of their teachers to come sit and have a conversation with us and give us some sort of real feedback. We had already, as I mentioned last time we were here, we'd already done the legwork on the quality of the text, on the alignment to the core standards or to our standards, the diversity of the text materials. We already knew quality pieces, but there were some questions that we still had left unanswered that we needed. So these were the focus questions that we brought with us and that each person was looking for while we were on our site visits. The things that the whole group, because again, we weren't able to bring all 20, but these are the questions that the whole group had that this site visit team was going to get the answers to. And so while we were there, I'm going to show you just some of the things that we saw. So we were looking For some of the teacher-facing materials, we wanted to really get our hands on and see what they looked like. On the left is their assessment system, and there's a passage there that the students are reading from. It operates similar to like a running record. And then in the middle picture are the intervention toolkits, the teacher-facing materials. Actually, those tent up, and on one side is what faces the student, and on the other side is what faces the teacher. And then on the right were some like word walls that are part of their phonics program. These are, because what might be a shift for some of our teachers is thinking about how to organize a conferencing schedule where you're meeting with every child to monitor their progress on a regular basis. So one of the things that they talk about, that the teachers talked to us about there that the professional development supported a lot was helping them set up schedules to make sure that they were meeting with students regularly. And it was a big part of the professional development push, especially early, that the coaches provided by the company ARC Core, they work with the teachers to help them figure out a rotation and a structure that's going to work best for them and for their students based upon the data they're providing. So this is just showing that there's structure, but then there's also flexibility in allowing teachers to make adjustments that are the best fits for their kids. On the left here is the assessment system then drives power goals, and power goals are connected to where the student is currently in his or her reading achievement. What I found was particularly interesting was that comes right out of the assessment piece. And then there's actually, they sort of have power goals, and then below that they have, I forget what the term was, but I'm just going to call them super power goals. That's not what they called them, but that's all I can think of right now. That really were key factors in helping, they're areas that they're the highest leverage areas. So if you were to focus on these skills, they're most likely to help students progress the fastest up the system. And that's all like articulated for the teachers already. And I think if you go back to other conversations that I've had in standing up in front of this group before, one of the realities that our elementary teachers face is they're asked to be experts in a wide variety of content areas. And the more that we can provide them with supports and give them some targeted direction, the less that they're having to figure out on their own. And then they can figure out, okay, well, what's going to be the best match for my kiddo? And they can work with the kiddos that they're having a difficult time reaching, as opposed to for every kid having to figure out what's the best match. Having a lot of that legwork done up front frees up their space for more creative endeavor and for more targeted work with students. On the right, this was the morning meeting, which is a component of the daily part of the structure. What is maybe different in their morning meeting than like a responsive classroom morning meeting, if anybody's familiar with that, is that through here is where we deliver, like their messages are very intentional, connected to reading. So it's there, for example, here this teacher is circling power words, which are part of, I think this was a kindergarten class if I remember correctly, and a lot of the kindergarten piece works on developing power words, which are another synonym for sight words or high frequency words that kids are most likely to encounter in text, which allows them to be able to enter text earlier in their reading. On the left is another picture of a different, another way teacher had organized conferencing schedules. On the right is some of the teacher supports for constructed response. Some of the things that the staff wanted to see was, after students write, what is it that they're doing with that reading? So this was one example of where students in this particular unit, they were looking at story elements. So you can't see all the way up the page, but there's setting, there's problem, solution, social settings. You can see, they're focused on culture and rules. So they're looking for specific things within in the story, and students are first collecting information on it, and then they're using that information to answer that bottom question, which is a little fuzzy, but it says, what is the theme or message of this text? What key details does the author use to communicate this theme / message? So they're collecting that information first, and then they're using that information to construct a response. So it's like a scaffolded way of getting at a constructed response for, I think this was a second grade, if I remember correctly. Let's see, on the left is just another example of a teacher support. around, this particular one happens to be around cultural bias, which was something that we've been looking at as a committee, making sure that the materials reflect the cultures of our students and give teachers and staff consideration about how to approach different subjects and content. So this gives the teacher something to be thinking about with this particular lesson relative to cultural bias and identity affirmation. On the right is starting to collect a sample of some of the materials that come with the program. So on the top are the independent reading texts by level, so you can see like the different colors. The colors mean something. The colors are connected to where the student's independent reading level is. Each color has like a 1 and a 2 within that color. We learned about there's a sticker system so that you can quickly identify, both kids and students can identify, like a red book has a red sticker on it, and then the difference between a 1 red and a 2 red is the 1 red has a black bar through the red section and the 2 red doesn't. So it helps to easily quick and sort, and for students to develop agency around organizing, managing, maintaining their own materials. In addition, which almost everybody on the committee noted, that it also comes from a position where the students are very, it's very goal-centered. So the students are clearly aware of where, we talked to a bunch of different kids, like I'm a 2 blue reader, and this is what I'm working on to become a 1R reader. So they're very goal-oriented. Students identify the goals they're working on. My group was in a 1st grade class where a student was taking their assessment, which is called the IRLA, and the teacher was scoring it on there's like a computer component that goes with it where all the information is tracked. And it got to the end, and the little girl who had like 5 adults watching turned to the teacher and said, I forgot what level she was moving to, maybe it was like a 2 blue. She said, did I make 2B? And the teacher said yes. And then the teacher had a whole routine. She stopped the entire class because they were all off working in centers and doing different work. And she said, I forget the young girl's name. She said, she has an announcement for the class. And she said, I'm a 2B. The whole class cheered. They had this whole awesome celebration that went along with it. And you would have thought this girl just won the marathon. She was the proudest little girl I've seen. And it was really cool to see, and again, the students own, and we talked to several different students. They understand where they are and what they're working on. It develops a lot of agency within their reading. As another set, this was the teachers had wanted to see how practicing teachers had organized the different sets of materials. Because there's the classroom readers on the left. It's a little hard to see the difference in the bins, but in the picture on the left of that picture is where the yellow's on top of the green. Those are the intervention materials at a specific, and I'll talk a little bit about more of everything that comes in the program in a minute, but those are the intervention materials which are separate from the independent reading materials, which is what's on the right. So if I remember correctly, this was all in the same room. So that's a teacher's teaching station where she works small groups from. So the intervention materials are right behind her space so that she can access them in order to work with small groups, where there's a classroom library set up for the students that are doing the independent piece there on the right. And then, as I mentioned, the students are aware and working towards moving through different progressions. There's a lot of the students are reading at their independent level. They're getting intervention to move them to the next the level. So each classroom, I think I've got maybe 2 more pictures of all sorts of different ways the teachers identify where the students are in a non-competitive, the Erla Island. It's not what we really liked about this one. It wasn't sort of a scale. It's just there's one level is blue, then there's green, red's over there on the tree. I think there was yellow up in the sun. And the kids it's a way the teacher uses that to help the students know where they are, so then they know which independent books to use, which books to choose from when they're doing their research projects, et cetera. And then the example on the right is just a different one with fish. I think maybe that was the only 2 pictures I put in. On the left is another example from morning meeting, where they're, again, using deliberate text as part of the morning meeting. There's a strong home component as well. The students are bringing books home daily, so there's just a picture of the book bags that they use to bring the books home. on the right is just another example of, as I mentioned, story elements. That all the classrooms, because of the way the units are structured, are working within this genre study, so they were all working on different elements of story. So we came back from that visit and reported this information, plus had a Q&A period where the teachers that weren't able to visit asked a bunch of further clarifying questions. And then we went back, you may remember, we were doing a consensus protocol to get to see what is the will of the group. Are we all moving in a similar direction? And we all agree that the will of the group is to go in one particular way. So teachers then used a Google form to anonymously score where they felt, whether it was a 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being strongly agree and that it's the right choice and they can support it. 2 being they accept this choice and will support it. 3 being sort of a low-level commitment that I can live with this. 4 being I still have concerns and I can't support this choice at this time. And if you remember, the last time I was here, it was 1s, 2s, and 3s. And this is where we landed on the end of that second round. So we had that meeting Monday night. And this is where the group landed. So you can see all 1s and 2s with 2/3 in the 1s. Now, so our recommendation as a committee is that ARC Core, which ARC stands for American Reading Company, is the correct choice to move forward. A couple of questions that came up, I know, at the last meeting from the school committee. One was around the assessment piece about whether or not there was comprehension as a part. So we were able to see the assessment tool in action, and there were comprehension questions at 3 different levels. There were sort of general comprehension questions. There were inferential comprehension questions, and what was the third? The third one on the assessment that we saw was related to text structure. So looking at comprehension in multiple different ways, and that was just on that one assessment that we observed. Another question was about sort of reusable costs. The program is predominantly reusable. Now, it doesn't mean the kid's never going to destroy a book. Just like when we buy textbooks for the high school, occasionally, and the schools carry a small amount of money in their budgets to replace a damaged textbook. So I'm not assuming that none of these books are ever going to get destroyed, so we will have to carry some small amount to replace things, but we're not have to buy a whole new set of student materials every year like we do with a consumable product. And then another question was around the size of the company. The company's been around since 1999. They just don't happen to be, they don't have market share yet in Massachusetts. They're a Pennsylvania-based company. If you look at their distribution, they're huge in Louisiana. And then they're in several other states across the country. I know from the network that we're in, Belchertown is another state in Massachusetts, that this is one of their final 2 products that they're looking at, just because it came up in the network meeting we had. Was that just yesterday? Yeah, just yesterday. Okay, so the bottom line. So where are we? Dollars and cents. So because of the cost of the program, we recognize because of the cost of the program and 2 other factors, we realized that a full pre-K to 5 adoption is not something we could really do this year. One, the pre-K piece, we're not 100% sure it's the best fit for preschool. In addition, Aaron and I were just having this conversation. Aaron is one of our preschool teachers. Philosophically, I'm still not 100% sure where I land and we land as a school committee about having a very academic preschool. Like, we've already made kindergarten a very academic place, and I'm not sure how much we want to keep pushing academics down into preschool. And I think we would have been heading down that road if we're not a little bit more thoughtful about this. And then the second part is the 5th grade, which 5th grade is a little more complicated because this structure, the time that's required for English language arts within this structure doesn't currently fit inside the middle school schedule model. So it now isn't the right time. There are other factors that need to be considered and other things that we have to think about in order to successfully implement in middle school, where it does fit with some minor tweaking within our current existing elementary school structures. So, final total price tag, $475,000. you can see, and I have a list of everything that's included in that, because I want to do that for comparison on the right-hand side. So the left-hand side is the product that we are recommending. That includes all student and teacher materials, which includes the classroom libraries, about 700 titles, intervention materials, small group reading materials, core text, teacher manuals. It also includes 26 days of professional development, which is broken out by building, so it's 13 per school. Online teacher resources, the online student data management and progress monitoring system that I mentioned, and then as well an e-library. And that e-library is in addition to all the other texts that they get in the class. So if kids within all the 700 books can't find something of interest, there's also an e-library which expands to thousands of other books that kids can have access to that is connected directly to their leveling system, so the students can go right in by the level that they're reading at and find a whole plethora of books. So as I mentioned, it's a reusable product, and Scott asked me, like, what's a reasonable amount of time to assume for a curriculum? And I said at least 10 years. So I use that as sort of a projective analysis. So minimally, we're looking at 10 years, with each year having to have a small amount of money set aside to replace some books, like we do with textbooks or we do with the library. You know, we don't replace the library every year, right? But we do have some books that have to go out of circulation. We have to replace a few of them, except the library has a lot more books. And then sort of compared to the other product. So the other product, the initial quote that I got from the rep looks smaller, and then part of it's because of the way they do their pricing. So the other company and I think I've mentioned this to the committee before, ARC Core is an all-in product. You're all in with us, you're in with our PD, we're like a full implementation and transition company. Where Pearson is a la carte company. You'll take as little or as much as you want. So when I originally got a quote from the sales rep, he just gave me the teacher materials and the student consumable book. So those are the first two numbers there. The teacher materials, essentially the teacher manuals, come up to $175,000 or $177,000 and change. The student material workbooks for a 6-year license is $115,502. I amortized, is that the right use of that word? Over 10 years. So what you have to do is take the 115, divide it by 6 years. That gives you an annual cost of $19,000. And if we were to sketch it out over the 10 years, you're looking at $192,000. So that's a smaller number. However, when you start to then add in all the other pieces that we're getting with the other program, the number starts to grow pretty significantly. So I went into the price, because that's all I got from the sales rep, and then I went into their pricing structure, into their website, and pulled up, okay, so if we wanted to have commensurate small group reading materials, so if we wanted to have a classroom library and we wanted to have small group reading materials, they have a set that they'll sell you for $11,129.47 per classroom. So when you multiply that times the number of classrooms that we're looking at, which is 37 classrooms, you get to a price tag of $411,790.39. And then if you want to add the intervention component, that's another add-on. Like I said, they're all a la carte. So that's $718.94 a classroom, so which gives you times 37, $26,600 and change dollars. And then you have to add PD on top of that. Their day rate is $2,800, so $2,800 times 26 days, you get $72,800. And then when you add all that up, you end up with a price tag of $821,365. So not only do I think ARC Core is the better product, but when we look at compare what you get from one product for another, it's a pretty significant price difference in that we're going with the cheaper product that is more comprehensive and includes all pieces. So I know I've had some conversation, and this is going to sort of dovetail into the budget presentation. So we had already had $120,000 from E&D set aside for this. And additionally, there's about $245,000 from the savings from the health insurance that we had earmarked to go towards the curriculum. And then Katie and I have sat down and looked at, given the comprehensive nature of the program that we're adopting, there's about $40,000 within the instructional and curriculum line that we won't need to spend next year, because this is gonna replace some of the things that we had budgeted. So that's an additional, and then, what am I forgetting? Is that everything? Oh, no. So then what that leaves ultimately from the budget that we've been presenting to what we're gonna ask for today is to add an additional 69,000 and change. Katie will have the exact number, of E&D added on. So it ultimately ends up being 189,000 and change. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, from E&D versus the 120. And then everything else is already captured inside the budget. Question?
Thank you, Mark. Questions? Ms. Scott?
So you had a nice list of questions, thank you for all of them.
And they're available to talk. I know you guys wanted to hear about the process and make sure teachers' voices were heard. So I paid all of them to be here and to speak favorably about the process. For the public, that's a joke.
So you have a nice list of questions. Are they all yes?
Yes.
I'm looking at them because you're going to say, the list of questions, do all the individual component, you want to skip it back?
Yeah.
All the individual, I don't need to read them all, that's silly. Yes.
So, yeah, sorry.
So you've got answers to all of them as pretty much all yes, and then any other additional observations that were outstandingly dynamic that are just make it.
In conversations with several of the
Thank you.
teachers while we were there, one of the most striking things was their statement of how well they knew where their students were, what their reading ability was, and that there was less time spent on assessment because it's continuous throughout the program. It was very striking how strongly they all felt about that. Even a few of the teachers who readily admitted it wasn't their favorite program just because they wanted more control over what they were delivering, they said that they did really appreciate the ERLA system.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Actually, Ms. Scout?
I have several questions. One is teacher time. For doing this program or the other one, how much, this is from A out of B or something, how much teacher time do they need to put in? Do they have to make anything more one way or the other? Because I'm thinking about all the other things we're asking them to do to differentiate from, backgrounds and everything else.
Hello there. I think when you adopt a program, no matter what program it's going to be, you are going to have a change. And teachers are going to have to look at that and say, what is my piece of that? So whatever I'm doing now, I know I'm going to have a change, and I know I'm going to have to put a lot more effort into it. This program is going to have a lot of teacher collaboration. It's going to be needed, but the output that other schools are seeing from it for the students and what they're learning, I think it's going to make it worth it.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot of teacher creative materials that get provided a lot.
I think the first time we looked at it, we were like, wow, that's going to be a lot on us. But the more we're seeing it and the more how it's laid out, I think it's going to be something that we can follow. But then working as a group and seeing what's going to happen that first year. But I think we're going to follow the program and see how it turns out. But yes, it's going to be a lot of work, but I think either program would have been the same thing.
Well, I wasn't really asking about changing from one thing to the next, because of course that's going to be, but I'm talking about if one is requiring more time, effort, materials, preparation stuff from teachers over time, a lot of times people are at their breaking point with having to do a zillion things. So I'm just asking that question.
So one of the things I did notice, so the other program that we looked at, the students' materials were all in one comprehensive book. So like their anthology and workbook and everything was sort of all in one. But if you think about that, that is delivering content and material to the middle. So despite the fact that it was like all in one, there was going to be inordinate amounts of work to kind of differentiate up and down. So I don't know that it really would have saved much time going with that, other than you weren't going to have to spend as much time like to that little narrow layer of the middle that the text was clearly hitting. So I think that there would have probably been just as much prep work and all of that to do either end.
Okay. B question is,
Can I just add on one
Okay.
piece, which is that the third grade teacher who met with us also mentioned that with each unit, she found that the graphic organizers that came to support student writing, which was all provided as a part of it,
Yeah.
she found those very valuable. And then, which may come up later, but she raved about the professional development, and that the coaches, and they talk about them as coaches, the staff that comes from the company, was always available to help them. You know, they provide a lot of information up front, and then they are there to support, like in a sort of like a gradual release model, so that they then it switches more to job embedded professional development, where they're coming in and modeling a lesson, or they're observing a lesson and giving the teacher feedback. So there's a lot of support there. And then, which I think was a separate conversation I had, I can't remember if it was part of the larger conversation we had or not, but they deliberately deliver materials and professional development 1 unit at a time. So we won't get everything on the first day, and teachers get inundated with the 4 giant units worth of materials. They deliver about 30 days ahead of the next unit, and match the professional development with the delivery of the materials, so that we're working at 1 unit at a time.
okay, the next question is, which one of you people voted for C last time? I had asked last meeting to have somebody here that was hesitant to do that.
No. I can't remember.
Okay, so no, only the cheerleaders are here.
We voted again, and then.
So why don't you guys talk a little bit about the process, about the consensus building process, about what it felt like as a teacher?
Let me go to my other question now, because I get the consensus building, but I just wanted to hear from the people that had some reservations, how they, but since they're not here,
Well, I think I'll speak now, let you. I think we all had reservations when we looked at the My View. The materials were given to us. We were able to look at them. We were able to bring them back to our classroom. How would we adapt them? The ARC, they didn't give you all the materials right away. So we were kind of second guessing, well, what does this look like? And what does that look like? And everybody kind of felt unsure. We liked it, but as teachers, we're kind of visual learners. We want to see it, touch it, see how it's going to work in our classroom. And that, I think, was the hesitance that many of us felt at that first voting.
well, for instance, on this thing where we just saw that the kid was in a certain level, and the red level, then moved to the blue level, then everyone knows who's in the lower level, and they're all clapping for this kid to get up to be at a different level.
Supporting each other. That's what they're doing.
Supporting each other, but there's no privacy in where they're at, as far as who's more accomplished in something than others.
Because it's working on building like.
Yeah, if you guys, when you do speak, if you can just come up there, because then the people at home can't hear you.
It's working on building like some of that SEL that, like, understanding that we're trying to build in kids, and it's very much individualized and working off of a growth mindset. So, you know, we all have conversations as teachers in classrooms about, you know, everyone has something that they're working on, and everyone has something they're really good at, and all of that, and I think that the kids are more focused on their own personalized goal of what do I need to do to move forward versus, you know, I'm a blue and you're a red and, you know, he's a green. It's from what and I wasn't at the site visit, but from all the things I've heard from like myriad people that were, no child seemed to feel anything other than, I know where I am, I know what I need to work on to move to the next place.
That would be great. I love the way that there was a consensus. I do love that. And lots of things, I mean, I do love that there's a social studies, as long as it doesn't take away from the reading and loving reading. I do love that there's some other things that are working in here. What I'm surprised about really is that we're doing so much that's data oriented. I'm surprised they're not paying us to do this, because Mark is so into, yes, because Mark, with data do this. And we would know, because I'm not saying anything about, okay, this group was at this level, and now they're at level 1 instead of level 2 or 3 or something. And if it's been around for 20 years, what's going on with that?
It's Amazon versus the local shop. So it's not, if you go to the local shop, it's not that you're gonna find an inferior product, but they don't have, they can't necessarily provide free shipping because their company is smaller. This one is a very small company,
Relatively speaking.
as compared to like Pearson that owns, like, I think America at least.
I'm not following you. I'm talking about data on, like,
Yes,
they
so-
all have something with their states, like we have MCAS. And so over time, if they've done it for 3 years for 3rd grade, where is that data?
So, yeah, so when we went, in that little cramped room that I talked about, was also their data room. So they had their data up on the wall. So their initial goal was around engagement. They wanted to make sure students were engaged during independent reading. But they quickly mastered that goal and moved on to, they wanted to move students from, what we tend to call like at risk in Massachusetts. I don't know if that's in Rhode Island or if it just was in that school, they called it emergency. So they wanted to move the number of kids out of emergency. So they had all that information up on the wall in that space. And the growth scores that they had in reading were off. Was anybody else there that you were there? You see like all the greens, right? They had moved significant numbers of kids. And then the 3rd grade teacher came in and she pulled up, because it's very data driven, that the early piece is like very granular. So the teacher is really working on the kids in steps and progressions within that level. Like, it's very granular to everything that kid needs to do to move to the next level. The kid knows exactly what it is he or she is working on. And the teacher reported, she pulled it up right on her sheet, that at that time when we were there, so last, a week ago, that her kids had already, as a class, had already made 1.1 years worth of growth. So they'd already made over a year's worth of growth
To what, though?
in reading,
In what test?
on the reading assessment that it's used. So like, it's all set to the standards about what a 3rd grader should be able to do, a 2nd grader, et cetera. So her class, and that's like a common metric we use within the state for making a year's worth of growth in a year's time. So her kids had already made over a year's worth of growth in less than a year's time.
Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Jackie. Accommodation, at the risk of not achieving the perfect and then throwing the good out with the bathtub, I commend the consensus of all of the staff. I think of, certainly it was a lot more complicated than the Iowa caucus and how they came up with, and as we said 2 weeks ago, how they elect a pope. That staff of teachers that spent a year trying to finalize this, I commend you. Also, an impression. These grade level teachers, you've been making up your materials. So I think there's a comparable equation here with a new text for everybody, and $475,000 is a lot of money, just like $350 was for the math K through 7 or 8 3 years ago. So we don't go lightly with a yes or no vote, but I think you folks spending the year looking at this material and then saying yes to it is going to do a great service for the kids. So for that, I appreciate the effort you put into it. I really don't need to hear all of the process that you put yourselves through. I think it's quite obvious to me that we're going to get a quality product.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Ms.
Oh,
Sanders?
I did have 2 questions besides
Oh, sorry,
that.
number 2.
One is your general reaction of the staff that has been working down in Pawtucket for about 2 years, I guess, with this program. Would you say it was very positive? Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
So, again, I struggle with my hats, but, so I guess I want to know about, I would like to know more about the assessment. And I appreciate that you kind of said that it kind of really breaks it down to the reading behaviors that they're seeing. But how often, is it just a formative assessment? Are there times in the year that we're going to have a summative assessment? How are we going to kind of track that data, and is it taking the teachers out of the classroom?
So that was something that I think we learned, right? So we had this conception of what it was, and we learned it was something different.
Okay.
So I had what you have, which is the BAS type of a thing, right? So 3 times a year, you do an assessment to figure out where the kids are. This assessment is ongoing. I think Elise mentioned this, it's continuous and ongoing. So in the beginning, and for us, definitely in our first year of implementation, the fall, like the first 4 weeks of school would be a time where we would be within the classroom, we're working on building routines, et cetera, and we're getting a baseline assessment done. Now in year 2, the rising first graders are gonna have the information for the second grade teacher already. So it's more of a comprehensive assessment the first time. It looks more similar to the BAS. This includes a word reading list, which is phonics based, which then helps the teacher figure out an initial assessment or an initial place to start assessing the student, and then that then goes into the something similar to a running record, and error cues and things that are similar to a running record are done. And then there's a comprehension piece, and that all gets put into an algorithm to get where the student fits. And that's done, the teacher enters the information, and then the computer gives them the algorithm. And like I mentioned, it's very specific. So a kid might be a 1B reader, but it's like a 1B.4. And that then directs the teacher specifically to what the power goals are that kid needs to work on at that particular level. So it might be, I don't know, completely making this up. You know, it might be this particular leader, this student is ready to start working on vowel teams. And then the intervention small group piece, there's lessons specifically for that thing, for whatever that particular power goal is. And so the teacher then meets with the kids in a couple of different ways. He or she can just conference, especially with the above grade level readers, and check in on where they are and monitor their progress. You can deliver a lesson, or you can do when you think the kid's ready to move a lesson, you do move a level, you do a more comprehensive, which includes a cold read, and again, error analysis to determine whether, and comprehension questions to determine if the kid's ready to make the full jump to the next level, or whether they're just progressing within that level. And I'm not an expert, this is what I remember, so if I'm meeting with a small group, and let's say the power goal for that group is CVC words, short vowels, and that group has demonstrated through the 3 or 4 lessons that I've done that they've all mastered the short vowels through the intervention method. Then I enter that into the online system, and it adjusts where they are, and so that's an assessment piece done through instruction, and it's done continually, and then it tells me what their next power goal is. So I'm not having to do a whole comprehensive assessment every time. I can use either my instruction, or I can use, there are sort of sub pieces of the ERLA that they can do too, like they can have them read the cold word list again, and what is the number of, if they had to be able to master 50 words that meet this particular phonics pattern, 45 isn't enough to get them to the next level, but 46 is, or whatever. And again, the teacher can just do that quickly, enter that information in, and that is an assessment touch point that moves them along. So after the first one, it's really formative along the way. And then that's just for the reading piece. And then we have summative assessments for writing, which is a rubric that builds throughout the unit in components that then builds to an overall rubric at the end. Then there are additional comprehensive summative assessments beyond that are part of the research project, but specifically that ERLA piece, it's not done, I had to rethink it, it's not done the same way the BAS is.
Okay. So what I heard you say was it's really based on the individual student.
Yes.
And that's what you saw when you went? Yes?
Yeah, at least you were the only one that went from this group, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that cold read or really true assessment to see where the students are in their reading happens based on what you're observing the readers doing.
Yeah. And when they're ready to.
So it's not like a certain time of year where the teachers are taken out of their classroom where.
Except for that first time in the beginning. They're not taken out of the classroom. It's part of building that routine in the beginning part of the year. And again, we'll have to do it in the first part of the year, the first year. The next year, it'll be easier for the teachers because they'll be getting the information that left in June from the previous, so the second grade teacher will be getting the information from the rising first graders. Unless, of course, you get a new kid, then you get it.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. You kind of talked about achievement. So you talked about intervention, and you showed that intervention kit. So is that something the classroom teachers are doing, or is that support staff that's doing that? How does that differ from the small group that you're talking about?
So yes and. So,
Okay.
so it can be done by the classroom teacher as part of her small group reading instruction, because some of it, depending upon the goals of the kids, some of it might be like more, it's similar to like an LLI piece, that it's got a word work piece and it's got a reading and text piece. But sometimes it could just be a phonics, like a mini lesson around a particular phonics skill. And then the kids are also, as part of they do Reader's Workshop twice in the reading cycle, so throughout each day. So they have a reading workshop first that is connected to the theme, whatever the overall theme is for that unit. And that's all done at grade level, at core text, that's shared among all the students. At K1, it's done predominantly through Read Aloud, and 2 up, it's done through a shared core text. So we saw 2 examples. One was a second grade, I think it was like a wolf story. So it was like, we would know oh my gosh, what's the story? Big Bad Wolf. Little Red Riding Hood. And then it was 4 other versions of that story from different cultures. And then in the 3rd grade, we saw a Cinderella story, and again, it was 4 other Cinderella stories from different cultures. But that's the shared on grade level text that then the teacher works to help kids access grade level text. And that's done as part of the first Reader's Workshop, and that's where, like, that example that was up here somewhere, this one. This is where the kids are responding. They're all working around the same things. They're all working on story elements, etc. That's that part of Reader's Workshop. Then later they come back to Reader's Workshop where they're in their independent levels, and then that's when the teacher's pulling small groups during that second time. And it's either assessing, doing a phonics piece, whatever the individual kid needs, or small groups of kids. If they have shared power goals, they're working in a group of 3 or 4 with a shared power goal, or it's independent one-on-one with child X because that's what they need.
So specific skills or a guided reading lesson?
Yep.
Okay. And then I have 2 more questions. I'm sorry. So you talk about power goals, you talk about super power goals, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they're not.
You talk about the red bucket, the blue bucket, the A, the 1, the 2. Is there is there a companion document for parents? Parents are not going to know what anyone is talking about. So how are we going to share this information of, this is where your student is, this is how you can help your student at home, especially if there's a strong home component. Where's that language that's going to explain, red and blue and green? Because that's what the kids are going to come home and say, like, I'm a blue 2 and a 3 and a 4.
I'm a blue 1, bluefish. Woo!
Short answer is I don't know.
Okay.
Because we're now, once we get past today or whenever you decide to vote, then I need to switch into implementation planning. So I'd be perfect. We had Katie's on the sub-team and Megan's on the sub-team that's been working with DESI. We had a conference call. Well, we were supposed to go there. Then so it ended up being this virtual
Mess.
Yeah. So there was some, the technology wasn't awesome. But anyways, we did have a meeting because the next phase is start to work around implementation. So we just had that meeting, was it just yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we need to move into implementation planning. That's one of the things we have to consider. But it isn't a question we asked. Does something come from the provider? Or is that something we're going to have to create? I've said all along, and use this phrase multiple times, the perfect reading program is like a unicorn. It doesn't exist, right? There's going to be something that we're going to have to fill in. So maybe that's a component.
There are parent letters.
Okay, sorry. So Megan found the parent letters. They exist.
Thank you. And my last question, which is kind of a big one, but you have kind of touched upon it. Just from experience implementing new curriculum, I know how hard it is for the buy-in of teachers. And I also know that you can spend a quality amount of money on materials and put them in teachers' classrooms, and it doesn't mean they're going to crack them open. So I guess my biggest concern, because it does boil down to the kids and what the kids need, is what support, and I know there's 26 days of professional development, but 26 days out of 180, it's a quality amount of professional development, but what about those days in between? Who's supporting the teachers implementing this new, could be completely different approach from what they're doing right now? That's a really big concern I have.
So, a couple of things. One is, it is an extensive amount of professional development. Second, the third grade teacher that we met with talked a lot, is essentially her coach is available to her. She texts the coach, emails the coach all the time. So even though there's certain days that the coach is present, the coach is available to her pretty much all the time. And then what Mary, Robin, and I have had conversation around. So this year the PLC meetings have been focused around the math curriculum. Teachers have been working on getting horizontal consistency around what it is we're teaching for math, how we're assessing, how students are progressing, et cetera. We've already decided next year is going to be ELA. So every PLC meeting is already dedicated to this. Plus the program, which is a nice little bonus for leaders, comes with like a PLC calendar. Like, here are the things to discuss to prepare for upcoming within your PLC. We just started talking about this yesterday, so none of this what I'm about to say is finalized. But we're going to think about, do we want to continue to have the existing ELA task force become the implementation team? Do we have members from this and other people become the implementation team? How do we incorporate our people that are in team leader positions, because they will be running the PLC meeting? So those are some things that we need to figure out, but the structure is there. They also have CLT meetings within their schedule that if they wanted to use that time, that's a little bit more decided by the team, but if they wanted to use that time to have conversation around consistent implementation of the program, those pieces are already embedded. And then, ensuring that Mary, Robin, and I maintain our understanding and participate in the professional development so we can be supports for the teachers as well.
One more, I'm
Yep,
so sorry.
no, it's fine.
So I know that it looks a little different in Chatham and Harwich as far as like the literacy supports that you have in place and the EL support that you have in place. But are those teachers going to be part of this training as well?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the English, well, yes and. So the English language learner teachers have as a side bit of conversation, we've been working on bolstering their resources as well. So this isn't meant to be, like the reading teachers will have probably more of a role than necessarily the English learner teachers.
Right.
Because they will be likely pushing in to do specific instruction that's connected to this particular program. The English learner piece, I should have said I don't know yet, because we have to sort of look and see, and it's not an area of expertise for me, so I have to go back to that team and have a conversation around, is this something that we should be, because I don't want, just like with our special education instruction, right? Special education should be specialized. So just doing the same thing that we're doing in general education isn't necessarily specialized. So I just sort of figure that out with English learners, instructors, or ESL teachers.
And I guess I meant, and I should have said it more specifically, like that part of the training so that they had an understanding of what was happening in the classroom so that they can support them in the right way.
Yes. So it might be around the intervention model, for example.
And that's why I wanted to be on the task force, because I'm not, well, as the English learner teacher, I'm not necessarily delivering this, but I wanted to make sure that we picked something that was appropriate for the subgroups that we're, looking at as far as trying to bolster achievement, which includes both L and economically disadvantaged. And one of the things that was such a selling point for me in this program was that the units are these very long periods of time that allow for background building and vocabulary development and all of these things that some of our L's and some of our economically disadvantaged kids just don't have exposure to, that we kind of level the playing field for the delivery of instruction. So I wanted to make sure that I had my fingerprints on what we were picking, even though I'm not necessarily delivering it.
I think that was smart. Thank you. I think that's it.
I don't know if Joe was first or Mr. Russell. Oh, Joanne was, I'm sorry.
No, I wanted the intervention question.
You're good.
so that was
Okay,
well done.
Mr. Osceola was next.
We have this as a potential vote this evening?
Yes.
A potential vote? I'm ready to move on it, personally. I have some doubts, questions, quibbles, arguments, but let me come to my core regarding this consensus poll. You have 2/3 saying, we love this, and that 1/3, is that the level 3, I can live with the choice?
No, that's ones
In
and
orange?
twos. It's all ones and twos.
Okay, so, thank you for a little patience on my color blindness, which you
I should have made it a little bigger.
may not have realized up to this point. Pawtucket is in the second year of implementation
At that school,
at
yeah.
that school at this time. That's the one you visited.
Yep.
2 years doesn't prove anything definitively, nor would you claim it does. So we've heard coulds, which is appropriate, some I don't knows, which is appropriate and fair. So it comes down to making an estimation of best choice, and what I've been looking at and what I've been seeing from here, I'm looking at the principals of the elementary school who I think are putting hands to face a little more often than the governor would recommend. But they are not going like, oh my God, this is a disaster. They seem to be pretty happy with what you're saying. So that's one thing I was looking for. But the most significant thing to me is the teachers who are involved are strongly in favor of the program. I don't know if it's going to work. I just don't know. We just don't have sufficient data. I also think some of the statistics and money was skewed a certain way to come to a desired end. But the most important thing to me is if you have a program that people believe in, the effect on the effort is significant. It seems always to be the case, and the effort the teachers put in has a strong correlation to the success the students achieve. Nothing new there. So this is a long-winded way of saying, okay, I'm in. I'm probably personally at a level 2. I accept the choice and will support the implementation of this choice. Thank you.
Tina?
Yes. Coming off of that, I do have a couple of questions. So getting back to that chart, where is it? I'm looking at 2 reports. Getting back to the color chart. Oh, thank you. You've given me yours. So it says 12 responses, and I'm curious, Mark, because the team shows 19. So which 7? I'd like to hear from the other 7.
Yeah, I mean, just, not everybody could make it to the meeting. So we had, some people got sick, and some people had after-school commitment for, because they were running clubs. Like, I had to throw this together pretty quick. The consensus protocol works under what is the will of the group, and the will of the group is pretty clear. And even when we were here before, everybody supported the decision initially. Nobody was a 4, which means I can't support this. I'd have to go back and remember exactly who was at the meeting and who wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Well, we're just making a big investment. So I guess
Yeah, I guess
I
I would
would
say
like
it's
to hear
been
from
a
all
year's
19.
worth.
Yeah.
These guys
It's-
have done a year's worth of work.
Yes.
A ton of work. They studied the products, they studied the research, they looked at, the amount of material and effort and work that they've done, like, they haven't come to this decision lightly, and at some point, we have to trust the professionals and I don't know, I probably can't ask this question because they're here standing behind me. But, like, at no point did I say, this is the decision we're going to and you better show up and support me. This is their decision. I facilitated the process, I helped organize, I helped put all the information in front of them. And we're never gonna get 100% buy-in on anything. Like, I've been in this game long enough. There are specific things that we have to do, to your point, to make sure that we get buy-in, but we're not gonna get it right up front. Because of the 20 people that participated, there's a whole bunch of people that didn't participate, but they were all given the opportunity to participate. These are the folks that dedicated the time, energy, and effort, plus the 16 other people that aren't here, to get us where we are today.
Okay, and so coming off of that, you have spent a year, and thank you all. I mean, this has been a lot, and we do appreciate it. But since you have spent a year, I am curious how we got to the 485. Because 2 weeks ago, I think the question was asked, how much was it? And I know you threw out a ballpark number of 300,000.
I said at least.
Yeah, so now we're at 485. I guess I'm just curious, in a year, did we not have an idea that 485 would be the investment 6 months ago?
I guess it would have depended upon which approach the committee would have wanted me to take. If the committee would have wanted me to find the best product for the district and then figure out how much that was going to cost us, that's the approach I took. If you wanted me to figure out a number and then find something that matched that number that wasn't necessarily the best product for our kids, that's not the approach I took. So all I can say is we started from the very beginning talking about what is going to be best for Monomoy. Because we ultimately had 6 products that met the standard according to ed reports and according to the curate. And our second half of our conversation is what's going to be best for the students in Monomoy.
Okay.
And this is where we landed.
And coming off of that, just one more question. So you went to Henry Winter School, their K2, year 2 of implementation, grade 3, year 1. I guess I'm not a curriculum expert, so I will admit that, but I guess I'm curious, I was wondering about the opportunity for the long-term result. I mean, I would have loved to have seen something that gave me a bit more than year 2 and year 1. So I guess that wasn't possible?
Yeah, I mean, the other product is brand new, so that nobody's using it.
All right.
And that's sort of it's like a book that just got released on the New York Times bestseller list. It's only been out for a short period of time. I mean, you only can work with what you have as far as time goes. But I mean, if you want, I can share all sorts of independent research that's been done, which the team looked over for each of the products that verifies the quality. Again, we didn't put anything forward that didn't meet the standards, didn't have the text quality, didn't rate high for teacher usability. Like, all that research was done way long ago. And so we're not putting anything in front of you that isn't highly vetted, high quality. It's ultimately landed in this space with, did we want to have something that was a basal-based program, or did we have something that was going to shift our instructional practice, be more inquiry-based, talk about some of the things that Megan talked about, which was have opportunity for students to develop deep content knowledge, vocabulary, in order to support reading instruction, so that their background knowledge wasn't a differentiator between our students, that the reading was going to be the focus, and that we were going to support that through high quality content. And the team ultimately decided that's where we wanted to land. And philosophically, and you guys can disagree with me on this one, but my understanding when we left the meeting about 2 weeks ago was that philosophically they felt like this was the right direction already. But it was a shift from what they knew. Both schools come from a basal-based program. That's what they've had for years. Chad, the one in Harwich, has been there for like 20-something years, right? I mean, it's been there a long time. And so this was a shift in practice, and they really felt like they needed to see it in action in order to make sure all the pieces fit together. And when they realized all the pieces fit together, then they were able to say, this is where we want to go.
All right. I guess that's my last question, because the other one was about the money, but you already answered, because I know what we have in our budget right now is not enough to cover 485. So, but you answered that question earlier.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're going to ask us to go into E&D.
For an additional, what's the number? 69,000 and change. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tina. Mark, I just wanted to go back on a couple things. I think we've definitely covered the curriculum, great curriculum questions from Mrs. Henderson. Again, I'm not a teacher, so I do rely on my counterparts to ask those important questions that I may not be able to understand or comprehend. But what I do understand and comprehend are a few things. First is that when you came and presented to us 2 weeks ago, I know one of my arguments was that I am more for a pre-K through 2 and a grade 3 through 5 curriculum. I feel like that caters to our needs more than a pre-K through 5. However, you stood here and had arguments or good arguments for a pre-K through 5 curriculum. And I listened and I was like, okay, let's do this site visit. Let's see what it is. I still wasn't totally convinced. And then you come back a week later after doing the site visit and are now telling me that we're doing a K through 4 only and it's not appropriate for the pre-K and it's not going to fit in the model for 5th grade, which we knew 2 weeks ago because we talked about how we were going to have to change the schedule for the 5th grade. So now we're only looking at a K through 4, which also means we now have to vet and or have a task force for a pre-K program as well as a 5 curriculum, or do we, so my first question is, do we already have a pre-K program that we're gonna be using? Is it paid for, or do we have to pay for it along the line? And the same would be for grade 5.
So for both those, the answer is no, we don't have to pay for anything else. We're gonna continue doing what we've been doing and looking for places to improve it. The pre-K conversation is a little different than the 5th grade conversation. My ultimate goal would be that, yes, we'd roll this up to 5th grade, but I don't wanna, back to Tina's point, like I don't wanna throw money at a situation if we don't have a reasonable solution for it. I, as the curriculum director, don't have control over the middle school schedule. So that's a bigger conversation that's beyond me. And quite frankly, it would add another big number to this, or not another, it would add more money to this, right? So I also know that there's a reasonable amount of money that we can afford as a district at this time, that the towns can afford to support. So trying to find that line. We do a K-4 implementation that allows us to address both elementary schools and get horizontal and vertical alignment within both elementary schools. The pre-K piece is just a different conversation. The program looks differently in preschool as well. Like it doesn't have all those components. It's really just the 100-book challenge, which is really about, it's mostly done through read aloud. And I just think we need to have, because it wouldn't be that much money to add the pre-K piece on. Again, it's more of a philosophical question, like what do we want preschool to look like? But as far as articulated vertical curriculum, the more that we can have of that, the more horizontal curriculum, I've done presentations for the committee on other times, the more that we can have our students' experiences and learning experiences and outcomes similar, the better it is for all of our students as they progress up through the grades. I'll ask Katie, as far as a 1st grade teacher, did you feel, you can come up, did you feel that it wasn't appropriate for 1st grade?
Which one?
Either.
ARC.
Either the programs that we were looking at.
Well, she's not gonna tell me it's not appropriate.
No, I definitely think, they were both
They were
appropriate,
fighting for
but,
the same thing you're fighting for. Do we need to do something different as a
but
program?
we're going in different directions. I think it is, both programs are appropriate. I like the art program because I think it individualizes it for the students because you are given so many different leveled readers. And we did go into it looking at, how is this program going to progress to 3rd and 4th grade? We had that conversation, I don't know how many times. Is this a K-2? Would it work? And when they went for the site visit, they realized that it is shifting. It's taking kind of like that K-2 where you read to learn, and then you have to, you learn to read, sorry. You learn to read K-2, but then you take that information, and now you're reading to learn because you have those components. And it does shift pretty well to that piece.
And as a 1st grade teacher, you, the other kindergarten and 2nd grade teachers, would you say, what would you say one of the most important things you wanted to make sure was in the program? Any program that we were looking at. What did we talk about over and over again?
Don't leave her. Let her come up
Yes,
with her
we're
own
leading the
answer.
witness.
We talked about, when we first looked at this program, we were looking at the phonics skills, because that was one of the top priorities behind writing. What was as a district, what are we looking for? Well, you need foundational skills in order to learn to read. And this program does have it. The other one had it plain and simple. This one has it kind of embedded. And I think with the small group instruction, it's going to be a great program for it. But definitely that was a highlight for us.
Right, and I'm not questioning 1st grade, and I'm not questioning
No,
that piece. I'm saying that you came in wanting a pre-K through 5 because as the new curriculum director, you're like initiative, which I love, was to take all these curriculums that we have, blow them up and get one curriculum, and I wasn't sold on it. And I was very much pre-K through 2, and then pre-K through 2, and then 3 through 5. And then we had this presentation about why ARC was the best, and why ARC was what you were going with, and it was a pre-K through 5. So now you have to understand that now we're presenting a K through 4, but yet ARC still fits that. And I asked myself, well, are there other programs that may fit a K through 4 curriculum now that we're not looking for one that's pre-K through 5? So that would be my first kind of comment about that. I just feel like we're all over the place. I feel like we had one presentation last week, and then this week, 2 weeks later, we're having another presentation. I had a finance subcommittee meeting a week ago where we knew what the line item was for the ELA, and all of a sudden, we show up to our meeting tonight not knowing, and all of a sudden, it's $475,000, and I'm voting on my budget tonight. And I haven't had a finance sub, and this isn't your fault, but I haven't had a time to meet with my finance subcommittee to go, do I want to take this out of E&D? Like, where is this coming from? I'm happy passing the budget with a placeholder for an ELA curriculum, but I'm not comfortable with how it's tied into this evening's presentation, having the committee having to make a decision on a curriculum that's expensive, but if it's what we need, I agree, but yet tie it into a budget vote with changes happening so rapidly. So it's not in particular about ARC, it's the way it's rolling out, it's the dramatic change from 2 weeks ago, I'm personally, from how much it was supported for pre-K through 5, now I'm looking at a K through 4. We need to consider other models. I've had teachers reaching out to me as a school committee member that there are other programs. I think it was Into Reading by Houghton and Mifflin, and Wonders by McGraw-Hill that were just reviewed. I don't know, like I said, I'm not a curriculum person, but I question a year in review. They've done a great job. This is not their fault, but for $500,000, I would like to know why these changes are happening so fast, and I don't like how it's tied into the presentation tonight, and it may not be you, but...
I can quickly speak to the 5th grade one, and I'll own...
Well, you've already spoken about the 5th grade one, because that was the scheduling, which we knew about 2 weeks ago.
But I think, one of the things I told Mark is, right now, we need to go take 5th grade off of the table, because the challenge is, as anybody that's been in a middle school or a school, to change a schedule is going to take, it's the same process they've gone through for looking at a curriculum. The middle school's going to need to go through that. And I told Mark, I said, that needs to be something we have a new middle school principal coming in, work with a new staff and go through a process of building consensus around a schedule. And then we can talk about, it's like, okay, we've extended the length of time that ELA has that we can roll the curriculum up, but we don't want, but it's sort of the wrong time to go pay for a 5th grade now for a curriculum that wouldn't fit into the way the middle school schedule currently is.
So why did we have Mark looking for a pre-K through 5 curriculum if we knew it wasn't going to fit?
Well, we didn't know it was going to fit until they land on a curriculum. So
this specific curriculum doesn't fit within our 5th grade schedule.
So my recommendation,
But others
I
may.
think I understand your question. My recommendation right here, right now, would be that we would do K to 5, and that we would blow up the middle school schedule. But that's not realistic, both from a budget perspective and from a schedule perspective. The schedule needs.
Right, I understand.
So I'm not saying that this is a great program for 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
We just might need
Not
another year.
conducive to what we do.
We just might need another year to figure out, we're bringing on a new principal, there's just other factors where we might need to take, sometimes, Robin's famous for this expression, sometimes you gotta slow down to speed up. Like in this case-
Exactly, I like that one.
In this
Sometimes
case-
we do need to slow down to speed up. Yeah, you just shot yourself in the foot, you know.
Okay, I would say we've taken an entire year to get to where we are. It's not like-
Absolutely.
And to the teachers that, I get those emails all the time, because the sales reps email the teachers directly, which is just slimy. But
I know, but I'm not going to discount teachers that have contacted me as a school committee member.
No, I'm
That
not-
they were
I'm not talking about the
contacted
teachers.
by salesperson.
Yeah, my point that I was ultimately trying to get to, because I'd already had conversations with both those sales reps, and never mind. Every couple of months, a new product gets reviewed and released. There's no end.
Correct.
So we had to draw a line in the sand at a certain point in time, and this was what we were going to use from that time. Those two products have been reviewed and released since we got this far into the process. But in another 3 months, so if we delay now, then something else is going to come out, and we delay, and something else is going to come out, and we're going to delay in perpetuity and never make a decision. This is, again, the best decision made by the teachers. And McGraw-Hill, Wonders, and Into Reading are both Basel-based programs. And philosophically, that's not the direction we want to go, because that was one of our options, was a Basel-based program. It wasn't because it was a crummy Basel-based program. It was we decided we didn't want a Basel-based program. So those two particular programs that you mentioned are two other Basel-based programs.
So potentially, it's not a la carte, but we could add on the 5th grade curriculum once the schedule fit to
Oh, yeah.
it. So now we're looking at paying $475,000 and then potentially having to purchase a 5th grade curriculum?
Potentially.
And how much would that be?
I don't know, because I took the pricing out of the conversation. So I would be
Right, and
irresponsible to
I
give you a number
appreciate
right
that
now.
you take the
Yeah.
pricing out of the conversation. Unfortunately, we don't have the privilege of
No,
taking the pricing out
I
of
couldn't
the
give you,
conversation, so.
I can't give you an accurate number.
Right, no, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, I know you're not gonna be like, it's $395,000, I totally get it. But this is, we are hot into budget season, and we are voting on a budget tonight. So I don't mean to come off that I'm negative about a curriculum. And certainly I understand how much work has gone into it, but you have to see my hesitations of things that have happened over the last 2 weeks, and that change with a very large amount of money being requested. And I can go back to probably a month and a half ago where I approached the committee and said, why isn't this a budget that we could put together? Why is it that our curriculum goes out to, we want the best of the best for our students, which we do want the best of the best for our students, but come back to me with, gee, we found this curriculum, I know we only have this much in the budget, this is why I want it, this is why it works, and then let us work it through. So it's just the backwards of any financial way I do anything, so I'm having a hard time conceptualizing the whole thing. And now having 5th grade not be part of it, but then potentially having to pay for that, it makes my brain go, maybe we need to just throw a couple more curriculums in there and just throw it out there and see what happens, to see if, and maybe nothing beats ARC, and that's great.
It'd be another
And you've got a
year.
nice, neat matrix that you guys have put everything into. Does it fit the box? Again, I'm not part of the task force. I respect everything that you guys have done. But I just,
Yeah, and I mean, I can understand the sticker shock. And I don't price the materials.
no, you don't.
But if we go back to looking at other curriculums, we gotta go back to the beginning. So now you're talking about next year, I'm standing in front of you, and we go another year without making any change, which, that's the committee's decision, Wouldn't be my recommendation. And I don't know what to say to that, other than I think we've gone through the process the right way, because the traditional process is, you hear your neighbors using this product, and that's what you do, and that's why Pearson has market share everywhere, because they have fancy sales reps. They come in and give you free gifts, and they fly people in from the other parts of the country, and they offer you free shipping and all this great stuff that isn't about the quality of the program, and it isn't about teaching and learning. It's about what can we give you a nice little, what did we get? The little tote bags, yeah. It's a flashy sales model. It's like going to a sleazy car salesman, and versus letting the quality of the product speak for itself. Madam Chair.
I'm gonna let that one go. Yeah, Mr. Russell.
I think we've all learned a lot this evening on this topic, including 2 weeks ago. I don't think we can take a pause here, and I suggest we vote. I've got a couple of comments to make. I don't think we can support a group of 18 or 19 staff for an entire year, meet with them 3 times, the most recent 2 or 3 weeks ago. Send them off on a final visit. My personal feeling is they have done a thorough, solid job. We discovered that possibly the price, it's not going to go down. The 5th grade youngsters, whether or not the complication is, and I agree with it, a potential new leader being elected in a matter of months is enough to say, let's pause. I agree with that. So at some point, I don't see any valid reason at this stage to vote to say, let's go reconstitute your committee, come back to us next year. The problem I spent over 40 years in the business. I learned more tonight in the last 2 hours about, and thank you, Mary, about elementary reading than I ever did. However, as a member of the school committee, I have to rely on you folks to do the legwork. You've been in this rodeo in the 3rd grade level, in the 2nd grade, in curriculum development, and the phone calls back and forth. So therefore, this is what we entrust. I think we have done the task as best we can to get a program, 1st grade through 4th, or K through 4th. We talk a little bit about pre. We don't even have a pre-program here in the region. So until we make certain we have the money, not for the reading program for pre, but for both towns to say, yeah, here's $1 million, $500,000 to start it. So why do we pause on that this evening? So I think that, Mary, one question you did have, and a good one too, when you said, where's the, no, don't cringe.
Okay.
Where's your 30, there are 37, 36 classroom teachers that are going to be launching this in 2 elementary schools. Where is the support for them you raised? Let me ask the rhetorical of that. Where's the support been with no program in the past many years in both schools? These folks have been on their own. Now, the support's for the principals there, but as far as saying support, and I'm an Irish kind of simple guy. We buy this program, and there are a couple of 3rd grade teachers in Chatham. Right away, automatically, they'll learn as they grow together. There's 2 folks that have a stake in this. Over at Howard Elementary, there might be 4 or 5 4th grade teachers. So they automatically, once they're committed, and this is going to be a multi-year learning process by our staff, notwithstanding the kids. So a great benefit will be to say, no, I don't have to create all the stuff that I've been doing, but in fact, I've got this Navigator piece that's going to be 70% of the work. And the classroom teacher next door, he or she and I can work how our thing's going. That's a great improvement, and you can't pay money for that. So I'm all in favor of what I've heard tonight and last month, and I would suggest we move the question.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Ms. Stout?
Last time I said that I wanted to ask a question, you said you'd bring people back. So I want to ask about the, was it only one of you that went to watch the program? Okay. So what is your name?
Elise Johnson-Dryer.
And what do you teach?
Robin and Mary also.
Oh, and Robin, okay.
I'm a special education teacher in Chatham for kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade.
Okay. So what I'm interested in is when you went to see the children read and do the reading lessons, what kind of combination of having them do goals and tasks and skills and joy of reading, what kind of combination or what did you see when you were in there?
The fact that their children are aware of what they're reading and where they are going, what they have to learn next is huge. That growth mindset, which you've heard over and over and over again tonight, is a huge part of it. And the fact that the 2 different times for group reading, where you have a whole class reading one text, and then the second read, which is related to that theme, but then they have more student voice. They get to choose a book from several, more than several. I mean, there are tens of books related to that theme to build their own love of reading, but yet give them the chance to explore something, an interest that they may have related to that theme.
And did the teachers there speak about, I am getting a very clear sense about this curriculum and that the kids are learning really good reading skills and how to set goals and feeling good about achievement. What I haven't heard about is love of reading. And so I just want to know if that's a high point or if that's, if it's more project goal oriented.
No, I think that because they have this opportunity to go and look for other books, even though it's a requirement, they're looking for a book they want to read to help build that love of reading, to help them find an interest, to read something that they want to learn about, rather than just, here's a story, we're all reading it, and this is your level, you have to pick one. There are so many choices within that level that they are driven by their own interest.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know these, I see two principals right behind you, so I have a feeling they want to say something.
Hi, I'm Robin Millen, principal at Chatham Elementary School. We did also attend with the team. I wasn't planning on going. I trust the team, and I felt that they could do it. But one of my other applications got canceled, so I had the opportunity to go. I just want to tell you a story because I feel like you're going to hear a lot in this story as to some of your questions, and I echo everything that was said today. But I sat in a third grade classroom. Don't quote me on the classroom grade. I sat in the classroom. I sat next to the children. Every child I asked, what were they doing? They knew exactly their goals and stuff like that. This was the first part of workshop. It was the whole class workshop. The children had read the story previously with their teacher. They had practiced the skills, which was a character setting, elements of a fiction text previously. They had a model on the wall. And the second read that they had done with this whole core text, and again at grade level, so it was not an individual leveled book, but again, raising that bar for all children and equity, access of rich text for everybody. They were together and they were paired into heterogeneous groups. So there was a stronger reader with a lower reader. I didn't know that at the time, but as they started reading, they realized. And the little girl said, I'll start reading. Of course, the one that knows that she can do it. She starts reading and she's going along. The lower reader, I watched her, and again, I didn't know this at the time. She was following right along. She was doing all the print text connections that you would want for a primary reader or somebody that was a little, addressing all those things. And so she got down through the first page, and the second reader was going to go. They stopped, totally naturally, not because I asked them to. They turned to each other and said, what just happened? The character did that. Oh yeah, we talked about the character, and we did this, and who was the character? So they're asking themselves those questions. Not, again, prompted by a teacher sitting there, because that was a natural part of the expectation of the reading process. They got to the second page. The little girl started reading, and I realized she was a struggling reader. She read, and then the little girl that was with her realized she was struggling. And she said, let's do shared reading together, because we can do shared reading together. So the little girl that was struggling said every first consonant sound that she recognized, didn't stop, read the whole page, and there was a part of it that said achoo, and it was in a big different text. It was the Three Little Pigs story, and achoo was going to happen. So, and they were going to blow down anything. She saw that text coming, and when that came, she screamed, achoo, and read right with it, because she knew it was there. She knew. She did that for about 7 pages. Every single time they came to a break, they asked each other the comprehension questions. They filled out the things together. There was nothing in that reading that you would not be excited about as a teacher, an educator, or a parent. That child was going to read. And then the teacher said to me, oh, you sat with the two children's name? And I said, yeah. And she goes, that little girl there, both of them were L, so both English language learners. The other one was L, newcomer, which means she had just been in the States for about 6 months, and she was SPED. It sold me. I am not a program person. Ask any of these guys. I am not a program person. I had a really hard time with this. I was sold. That's all it took. So there's my story.
Thank you. And
Mary Oldak, principal of Harwich Elementary. I think Robin's story about her experience with those two little readers is a great answer to your question earlier, Mrs. Stout, about privacy and the reading culture within the schools and how we're really promoting the social emotional intelligence that our children have and accept each other. What I wanted to offer is more around just a broader picture about differentiated instruction. That's been such a huge driver in our strategic plan about how we can address each student's needs. And I'm very, very proud of this task force because the Pearson My View program, you know, human nature is that you sometimes gravitate to things that feel familiar. And a big box program like Pearson, like the Hope Mifflin or the McGraw-Hill products are very similar to each other. And they were able to step out of their comfort zone and consider something different because it's better for our students. And as an educator, what I'm most impressed with, and I didn't share my opinion openly in any of these discussions because I really wanted the task force to come to their own conclusions and not be swayed by anything I was saying, is that this is so student focused. It's so focused on what each individual child needs. And if we're going to close achievement gaps and we're going to make a big shift in how we deliver reading instruction, this is the approach that's going to make that happen more than a big box program that isn't as individualized, isn't as focused on the individual student. So that's what I really feel is the strength and the difference between the big commercial programs. Thank you.
I guess what I would like to just say is I really appreciate the last comments and all of the comments. And it's very important to me that all of the people involved with this curriculum hear that what I'm hearing is every member of the school committee appreciates everything and all the work that went into it. What's happening here tonight is that because of money and because of when a curriculum changes from one thing to another significantly, that falls into a purview where other smaller curriculum changes don't. And so we're just trying to do our job too. But we appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, Sharon. Joanne?
I love the sophistication of the program. And I'm not a program person either, but I taught 8th grade for 35 years. So when I would get my children, obviously the hope was they can read. And we would do the same thing through the Columbia Reading and Writing Project. Through the Reading and Writing Project, that's exactly what we did, is what you're doing with those little guys. I just think it's wonderful. I'm excited about it, and I think the collaboration is going to make that program so rich. And so for that, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Tina?
Yeah, I just want to echo again, we appreciate the work. I mean, I truly, you've made a very strong case. My only issue, I just sit here and I'm wondering about the timing. I don't know what happened in the timing and maybe why 2 weeks ago we couldn't hear this. And then 2 weeks we could kind of sit with all this. The timing is just a little off for me. I don't know what happened. I don't know why you couldn't get the site visit done I don't know. But it's not, you've made such a strong case for the curriculum. So it's really, for me, as I hear about the curriculum, I trust all of you to do your job. I'm really just concerned because tonight we are voting on the budget and this 475 is just here, and now I feel like I need to digest it a little bit, and that's just how I feel as one school committee member.
No, and I understand that, and I fully own that. Like, in reflection in the process, actually just on our DESE call, after you guys, the teachers that were on the group had to leave early to participate in the work that Scott talked about earlier, where they were looking at, possibilities around virtual learning. So I stayed on the call for a little while longer before joining them. And they were asking some reflecting questions. And that was, I should have, in hindsight, should have started probably a month or two earlier when we got into some of the evaluations. So I should have got off the ground. We did a bunch of work last spring into the summer, and then we took a little bit of a break in the fall. I should have gotten into things earlier in the fall because the timeline caught up here on the back end. Then other things were sort of outside my control as far as, when the vendors were available to come to present to us. And we were working on we were trying to work with this DESE task force, and they had these meetings already scheduled, and I just didn't align that well enough with the budget process. So we ended up in this space between when our last meeting was with them and we learned about how to properly, like, I didn't make this stuff up about the consensus protocol. You know, I learned this myself as a learner and how to run a group and facilitate a group through this other team that we've been participating with. So from that time to where we are today, ended up being a pretty short window. And in reflection, I would have made some changes. I can't change that, and so the quandary that you find yourself in, I'll own that, because I didn't pace the timing right.
Joe. Mr. Osceola.
Madam Chair, I think it would be useful if we could find out where the committee stands on the next step. That is, could you ask for a show of hands if we are ready to make a decision tonight? Now, some might say yes, some might say no, and the question isn't yes or no. The question is, do we need more time? Do we need more discussion? Or are we ready to take this to a vote, aye or a nay? And could we just ask for a show of hands if people, if you agree, are people ready to move on this tonight? Are we ready to take a vote tonight or not?
And are you, so you want to know, with a raise of hands, who is ready to prepare to vote on the approval or not of the ARC curriculum as presented? However, that's separate from the budget vote, but the budget includes, and Dr. Carpenter, you can clarify for me, what does the budget total for the ELA curriculum that we are voting on tonight include? What's the total?
So I can go look it up. We have modified our whole budget presentation, so we have the curriculum as it, if you want to, Mark, flip to your last slide that has the dollar sign. Just keep it there. This is your all-important slide, actually. I think, so we have adjusted the budget presentation that we have been doing with the downward shift on our budget that the budget subcommittee discussed to try to get closer to a number that might be more palatable in Harwich. So we've shifted it down. Because, and I think some of the challenges Mark has is, one of the things he was in the process of doing when we last met was still negotiating with the publishers as to what the price would be. So, so the $475 is new information in the last 2 weeks. So when Katie and I got the $475 number, which was just literally in the last couple days, it was, okay, how do we get there? And what we have discussed is we can get there. We still have a healthy excess and deficiency. If we use an extra $69,000 of excess and deficiency, we can do this as a one-year rollout for next year. Alternatively, we can, I can go and do the whole budget presentation.
No,
we can talk about what we, what we could, we could go, look at, okay, do we shelve ELA curriculum, and we can talk about how we would downgrade what that budget number is. I mean, we can do that too.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted, I think it's important for the committee to understand you're either going to, the first vote is that Mark's looking for is to either approve the curriculum or to not approve the curriculum. But tied to approving the curriculum would be then we move to the budget at our, which is our next, and then we're going to have to separately discuss if we approve the budget as discussed, or are we going to amend the budget? So just, I wanted everyone to understand that one impacts the other. Your decision on one impacts the next. So I'm just going to let Ms. Scott go, and then Joe, I think we could probably move forward with that. Ms. Scott?
I think that we can take two separate votes. If we take the vote to support or not support the curriculum change, while I understand they're very tied together, I think that we then move into the budget discussion and we figure out how to pay for it. And if we can't pay for it, we can't pay for it, sorry. And I think that if we support the curriculum, we start out by supporting the curriculum change, and then we move into figuring out the ways of paying for it, or maybe we have to reduce a little bit. of one classroom. I'm trying to read your mind as to that's what you were about to say.
Now you're cutting my classrooms.
Well, I'm just saying that I think, yes, I'm sorry, not a classroom, a grade level, sorry. My head was going there. So I think that it's important that we decide whether or not we want to continue the conversation of how we're gonna pay for it by supporting or not supporting the curriculum change.
So, yeah, and I would say that's what I'm asking is the committee to support the curriculum change. And maybe it was, lessons learned about the way I presented the information. Again, I'm not necessarily saying it's just for K to 4. I don't know whether we want to call it an elementary ELA curriculum, but I'm ultimately looking for support for the curriculum change. Then I recognize there's a budget conversation around that implementation. I tried to put together sort of moving into implementation, thinking about K4, this is what it would cost to inform the budget decision. But yeah, I'm ultimately, from my stance, looking for support for the curriculum.
Perfect. So Joe, if we did a raise of hands, if people were prepared to vote to support a line item in the budget for an ELA curriculum?
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Ms. James.
So we're supporting a line item is already there.
To support the curriculum line item, but not specifically the curriculum chosen by the task force, I guess is what.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm looking for support for the
That's-
particular
see, I didn't just
curriculum
hear-
by the
I didn't
task
hear that.
force.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
The budget conversation is, I think I agree with Mrs. Scott, it's separate.
Right.
What I'm looking for your support is that the team has recommended this curriculum for English language arts. And that, at the lower level, K to 5, and then that would be, we're looking for your support for that curriculum. How we were able to implement it at what grade levels is obviously going to be dependent then upon your conversation around the budget.
Correct. But then it becomes changing what the ARC program looks like for the district, because we may have to take a grade level out? Is that
Yeah,
what
we
you're
might
saying?
have, we would have to have a conversation around,
So-
there could
so
be
then we're
implications.
back to having more than one or two curriculums?
Or we are looking at it as a multi-year effort.
Rollout?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Scott?
I'm gonna usurp Mr. Osceola for a moment.
Yep.
But first, before I do that, I want to have a couple of 2 cents.
You can have 50.
I don't want to talk that long. I think that Terry said earlier, he's not an expert in curriculum. I'm not an expert in curriculum. You want to talk numbers, I'll talk numbers with you day in and day out, all day long. We have the benefit of Meredith, who lives and breathes this curriculum as much as our teachers do. And I think that having her on the committee to be able to ask those questions where my eyes started to glaze over by all of the letters, sorry, it's okay, it's good, because you got your answers and you were able to have intelligent questions, conversations going back and forth. And so in that sense, I have to trust what is being brought, and I go back to the consensus. And I would even be able to say that if 12 of the 17 teachers, or actually last time we had all 19 was surveyed.
Yeah,
Or
it
at
includes,
least
that,
almost
there's
all
20,
19.
take myself out, and then the two
Well, I
principals.
hope you took
so, yeah.
yourself out.
Yes,
That's-
yes, I didn't vote.
Sorry. So at the last survey, nobody was at a level 4. Everybody was at level 1 through 3. You're never going to get everybody being at a level 1. You're just not. And with teachers, you all have your own ways of doing things, and to have to adjust to it, to look at it and say, how's that going to fit in my classroom? What am I going to do here? How am I going to do that there? So to even have everybody, and I understand there's 12, but I saw a couple of head shakes, so I wonder if maybe one of you was not a part of the 12 votes. So actually, we have 13 people who voted and are a 1 or a 2. I feel like to have them come and to very strongly suggest and to speak all of these accolades, where we have 6 different educators, 7 educators, talking about how this would be the best fit for our schools and the best fit for our classrooms. I just feel like looking at other options that might come up or might have come up within the last month, the budget conversation is different in my mind But I feel like to say, you know what, we need to go back to the drawing board and start over, because we didn't have a full consensus. We had, a third of you say a level 2 instead of a level 1. I feel like it's going against what their recommendation is at this point. Therefore, I'm usurping Joe by saying that I would like to move to approve the art curriculum as presented. Second?
Second.
Joe took it from me. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
Thank you.
On to
Thanks,
budget.
guys.
Thank you very much.
And then, let's see, Mark, if you can just keep that slide up for a second to
Now
help.
we can talk numbers.
To help inform the budget conversations. So, so the next, or the second best thing that the teachers were looking at was Pearson's My View. So whereas ARC has a $475,000 cost that is all loaded in year one, Pearson's, if we got all of the things in the a la carte menu for year one, Pearson would be just that $821,365 minus the textbooks that you'd have to purchase later on. Apparently, when I was talking with Mark, they give you, 4 years worth of the consumable textbooks, and then you have to go out and buy more of them. So there's another, $192,000. So the Pearson product year one, if we were going to implement it K through 4, we'd be looking at $628,865 by my calculations, which is substantially more than the $475. While I think there was a steak dinner in it for Mark, if he could have actually negotiated this down to the $300,000. I was some coaching I gave Mark after last time. I was like, if Terry ever asks you a question like that when we haven't negotiated it yet, it's like no, or overshoot it. But it is a, I think, relative to the Pearson product, a cost-effective thing if we're looking at it. The challenge is it's $69,000 more than what we had initially talked about in our budget conversations. And then the punchline is that it really is not going to change our budget conversation bottom line. It changes our what do we do about excess and deficiency conversation, because the budget number actually goes down. So the budget conversation that we're going to have is actually less than what it was before, because when the budget subcommittee met, there were $92,000 worth of reductions that we made in our budget. So the budget, as it impacts the two towns and their assessment, actually goes down by $92,000. The recommendation that we have, that Katie, Mark, and I, sort of were like, hey, in order to move forward a rollout of the ARC core, we would have to go and tap into excess and deficiency a little bit more. So I'll let Katie jump into what the reduction piece is.
Katie Isernio, Business Manager. Is this on? I just want to advance the slides to the section where the discussion changes. If you just bear with me.
So it's our same budget.
Yeah.
We just added the section that would change is, really picks up where we had the strategic initiative and what that cost is, and then how that then trickles down into the rest of the budget, along with the reductions that we make.
And just as a reminder, our E&D was certified for FY19 at $2,095,281, over 5%. And we originally discussed using the same level of E&D of $550,000 to support the FY21 budget that we had in '20, plus the additional $120,000 to help pay for the curriculum. So the strategic, wait a minute, this isn't, I'm sorry. This isn't the most up-to-date presentation. This is the, in your packets in front of you is the most up-to-date one. I have it here. There were two things I emailed. This is the second. Okay, hang on. So anyway, on the slide that is in front of you are the numbers that we put in, that we had the cost of the $475,000. I have it on a flash drive as well, for this, with a recommendation of using $189,809 in excess and deficiency, which is an additional $29,809. Just a minute, I need to get the flash drive.
That's all right. Ms. Games, do you have a question? I do have a question, but I don't know if it's a little early.
I don't know either, until you ask it.
So, hold on, let me see my notes here. Words Their Way. It was my understanding that if we adopted,
Stay tuned.
okay.
I think
Thank
she
you.
just said it's too early.
Yes, because I was just curious if the 92, because I don't remember the 92 taking the 30 out. Okay, all right.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Very, very good, though.
Madam Chair?
No.
I was gonna.
Ms. Scott?
Are you helping him
No.
find? I'm just wondering if maybe you could, since you were waiting a moment, you could do a brief explanation as to why we use $550,000 of E&D and where that money comes from, very brief.
Very brief.
Because I know that we had some questions about that from Harwich Selectmen. I'm killing time.
Okay, so excess and deficiency is at the end of the year when all of your, with your revenue and expenditures, it's what you have left over at the end of the year. And it's similar to the town's free cash. And the district made a commitment to you have a percentage of E&D and then to use any excess to support, any excess beyond the 4%, what we first talked about, to support the operating budget to reduce the assessments in both of our towns. We used $550,000 to support this FY19 budget, and our E&D came in favorable when it was certified. Some of the E&D, the reason that we have some monies left over at the end of a fiscal year is that when we set our budget, it's based on the Chapter 70 money that's known at the time. Last year, Governor Baker signed a budget in August, and we actually got additional Chapter 70 money. But we don't go back and change our budget. We live with and use those revenues, so anything beyond that goes
Can I
into
ask
excess
a
and
leading
deficiency.
question?
Sure.
That's kind of like us returning back to the town's money that's
Exactly.
left over
So-
from our previous budgets.
Right, so as
You
a
see where I'm going
reminder,
with this?
when a school department is a department of a town, at the end of the year, if you're, as the Howard Public Schools used to be, as the Chatham Public Schools used to be, at the end of the year, any money that wasn't spent in the school department's budget, which was a department of the town, it went back to the town. We are not a department of a town, we're our own separate entity, and so at the end of the year, any funds that are left over remain with the district, and that's what goes to excess and deficiency, similar to a town's free cash. So what the district does in order to support our two towns, and in essence, return back to our two towns some of our excess and deficiency, is by way of using excess and deficiency to reduce the assessments. So you'll see when we go through the assessment sheet, even though it looks a little complicated, so we are in fact at this point giving $550 back to the town by reducing the assessment, and then we're also proposing, because of this purchase of the curriculum, rather than raising the budget by the curriculum, using some E&D to support that. So,
Thank you.
with that being said, okay, sorry about that. That's what happens when you edit at the last minute, as I was doing. So we're starting with the strategic initiative, and these are the numbers, Tina, that you were mentioning. So at $475,000, as we saw, was the ticket price, the purchase price. Originally, we were looking at using $120,000 of excess and deficiency, and what this recommendation is to use $189,809,000 of excess and deficiency. In the general fund budget, we have $245,191 used, which came from the 0% health insurance increase. And we have an addition of $40,000 in the general fund budget for ELA curriculum purchases that will not need to be purchased if, in fact, we purchase this new curriculum. So there were words their way that was budgeted for $30,000 between Howard Elementary and Chatham Elementary. And in addition, there was it was an e-text, yes, reading A to Z, which then makes up the $40,000 that the ARC curriculum has those e-texts, and we wouldn't need the books that are associated with the words their way. So that's that piece of it, if that answers your question. Okay. I don't need to go through the process here with the curriculum adoption. As reflected in the minutes that you just approved from the February 27th school committee meeting, the town of Howard was looking for the school department to come in with a under 2% and increase in our assessment budget. They're two separate things, but they all got rolled into one. We looked at that, and to come in at 2%, under 2%, would be us having to reduce our budget by about $225,000. And we felt that this was a pretty solid budget to begin with. But as we're all on the same team. So the finance subcommittee met together and went through, I went through the budget line by line and came up with different ideas on how to make some reductions. Some were looked upon not very favorably, but we wanted to make our attempt of meeting the needs of our member towns. So we came up with $92,000 in savings that we found throughout the budget, which would not impact programs. For instance, and those came from, in the budget, we had $10,000 for some follow-up consultant work for the strategic plan. Well, we reduced that to $5,000. We had some favorable retirements and some savings that we know in the hiring process. There'll be some savings in that area. Some instructional expenses that are not related to the words their way or anything like that, but just going through some replacement books in an area that was not needed. And then we had some school services, extended year salaries, and also some contractual obligations under the 3,000s, which was some student activity clubs, as well as some transportation adjustments that led us to the $92,000. So this brings the budget to a $44,734,623 budget, I believe, without my glasses. 41. Did I say thousand?
That'd be good,
Oh,
though.
million. Let's call it 41 billion. Anyway, So then this is how it breaks down with the wages and the percentages. And then here are the cost centers in terms of where the budget lands. And I have a sheet, I just want to go back, I'm sorry, I'm jumping here. This sheet here. What this has is a 2.41% increase in the FY20 budget, with a budget increase of just over $960,000. And I think that it's important for you to notice that about $800,000 of the increase in the FY21 budget are contractual obligations in instructional salaries, et cetera. And what it is, it's an overall assessment increase of 1.5, is that a 5 or, I don't know?
Yeah.
1.52% overall assessment. But because of the way the minimum contribution plays out with the three towns, it's a 2.36% increase in the Howard assessment and a negative 9.4% increase in the Chatham assessment. But the overall assessment increases overall for the district going up 1.52% and a budget of 2.41%. Okay, any questions at this point?
Madam Chair. Oh, I'll just talk. You mentioned, so when we met as a subcommittee, we had pulled out the 92,000. Is that including the 40,000, or there's 40,000 on top of that 92?
The 40,000 is still sitting in the budget. We didn't cut 40,000. So that
So we're just shifting that to the curriculum.
Exactly,
Okay.
and that's still, that 40,000 is in the cost center 2000s, which the curriculum is also in, which is why you're not seeing a big shift in
Thank
that
you.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
I have a question.
Excuse me, Ms. Games?
Can you, let's see, on the slide, it's page 3 here. So in the reductions, where did the athletic transportation fall? The 17,000 we had talked about?
That's in the 3,000s.
So it's, okay, that's where it
Other
is.
school services expenses.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to figure out where it landed. Okay, that's fine.
And in that also with some, there was an increase in some field trip lines, so there were other transportation things that needed to be adjusted as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions? Keep going? Okay.
Yes, please.
So this just shows how and so when the time comes, fingers crossed, this would be a vote, how we would now vote the cost center. We vote the budget by the cost centers, so this would be the slide that we would vote, the 1,000s and all, all the way down to the 9,000s by those dollar amounts. This shows a comparison, and I think it's important that all of you know, that this shows the actuals back by each one of those cost centers from FY15 all the way up to the projection of FY21, so you can compare where things have been and where we are going. These are by the categories, salaries and wages. You can see that the majority of the increase is in fact in the salary and wages line. As I mentioned, that's our contractual obligations with all of our instructionals. This is a percentage-wise, overall, our budget has 54% of the budget is in fact in salaries and wages, and the fixed charges, 18.55%. That's where our insurances, health insurance, property insurance, et cetera, are all located as well. And there's the $41,734,623,000 just presented in a different way, showing the overall increase is at 2.41%. The capital looks, the 16.39 is relative because we put the $50,000 back in a $305,000 line. So that's been restored in the budget as the stabilization, which was wonderful to have because that paid for the removal of Castle in the Clouds this year, a portion of that account. So it was fortunate that we had those funds available to us. This did not change the capital plan, but it made sense to keep it in the flow of the slides where they were. And this is as a reminder, and of course, all this will be posted on the website. This is how the budget is funded. Again, this is the same slides. These didn't get modified. Reminding everybody where we are with our per pupil comparisons. And then moving from the budget to the assessment. So this is, so what I have here is I have the revised assessment in two ways. One is with the ELA curriculum, and one is using more E&D, and the other is just how it was before we added the ELA curriculum. And basically to show you that the bottom line is that the assessment for the two towns doesn't change, just the amount of E&D that we'll be using. So I'm going to jump right to the ELA one since the vote was taken.
Is that the one with the red? Or this one?
This
one.
One on the
see, I
side.
got it.
Yep. The one
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Wrong page.
So if you look at the top, the overall budget to the far right is $41,924,000, but we want to keep that separate because we don't want to artificially inflate the budget because this is a one-time purchase. So we're showing that this would be using $189,809 of E&D for the curriculum purchase, as well as $550,000 of E&D to support the overall operating budget. I think it's easiest to look at it, so we have the Chapter 70 money, which is the number that was released with the governor's budget in January. That did not change. The E&D of the 550 did not change from our public hearing presentation. The E&D used to purchase the curriculum increased by the $69,000 plus dollars. The charter school number is the same that was posted by the governor. Our Medicaid dollars remained the interest, and the miscellaneous revenues, that's where our leases that we charge for the Y and Head Start, that's a miscellaneous revenue. So then, as you know, it gets assessed by the state issues to us what the minimum contribution is required for the town of Howard and the town of Chatham. And then the balance is then assessed to each town based on a 3-year rolling average. And this year, it is 74.35% Howard and 25.65% Chatham for operating. We then assess the transportation. As a reminder, transportation is assessed a little bit differently. The operating budget is on a 3-year rolling average based on foundation enrollment. Transportation is a 3-year rolling average based on the number of kids from Howard and the number of kids from Chatham that are sitting in our seats in our schools. And then the debt is assessed the same way as the operations budget is. So, taking us to an overall assessment to the town of Howard of $27,272,527. An overall assessment to Chatham of $9,053,203. This is without my glasses. For a total assessment of $36,125,730. And if we go down to the bottom, it is an increase, overall increase in the assessment.
There's a weird man in your purse.
Thank you.
I wanted to see you wear the sunglasses.
I know, I've done that before. I've had to drive home in sunglasses a few times. Oh, so.
There the numbers are.
There we go. So if you see overall, we have a 1.52% increase in the assessment. Our budget is a 2.41% increase. However, based on the minimum required contribution, we also know that there's been an increase in the enrollment in Howard and a decrease in the enrollment in Chatham. So that overall, we have an increase in the assessment for Howard of 2.36%, a decrease in the assessment to Chatham of 0.94%, with an overall assessment of 1.52%. Questions, comments?
Katie,
Mr.
real
Russell?
quick, and the hour is causing me not to subtract it. I fully understand all the way through. Our present ED balance with the new revived 69 subtracted from, to add on to it, would be what?
Okay. I'll get that for you.
Okay, 145.
So that's the E&D balance after the ELA and everything else is
Right.
taken out.
I had every number prepared but that
I'm
one.
sorry, Katie.
That's quite all right.
I did
So-
mark a bad turn 2 weeks ago.
I'm just finding my excess and deficiency slide. We'll just have to do a little math. Here we go. Okay, so if anyone could be so kind as to do a little math for me out there?
Not Terry, because he said he can't
Okay.
do subtractions
Okay.
tonight.
Nancy, can you do a little math for me, please?
I'm
I don't
right.
want to.
Hold on, I'm
Okay.
with you. Yes, where is it? Bring it.
Our E&D was certified for FY19 at $2,095,281. We're proposing to use $550,000 to support the operating budget and
80. Thank you.
Thank you, audience members.
let's see, 189,809 to support the curriculum purchase, which would leave an E&D balance of
1.355.
$1,355,000.
472? That counts.
472, which is probably just under 4%?
Yep.
Yeah,
Of the 41 million.
yeah.
I can do that too.
So we have a healthy E&D balance,
Yeah.
is the bottom line. Go, Meredith? So-
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just so, my headache. Mrs. Henderson?
Just because I'm still learning, what do we want our E&D budget to remain at?
The superintendent and I, when Monomoy first started, there was 0 E&D because we were starting new. And we did a analysis of what the town's free cash looked like and also about, overall across the state, what did other regional schools have for a balance. And we had a projection of a goal to have 4%. So we've exceeded that goal, and a lot of it has to do with some favorable revenue that's come into the district. We had, extraordinary relief because of circuit breaker, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted it to be around 4%, and it's at 5, just over 5.
And then if we take this to do what?
3.24.
What is it?
3.24.
3.24%.
3.25. Prior to year end.
Yes.
Before we probably will get a little bit
They're
more.
probably, yeah.
Okay.
You can think maybe around 300,000.
Okay.
But it also could, the
The
governor
market's
could
doing
give us
really well
more,
right now.
we could get more Chapter 70 money or whatever, that's what folds into E&D
Still
as
some
well.
variables.
Yes.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, any other questions for Katie right now? Discussion? Are you gonna?
This is my last time.
I know. Is there a song? Okay,
So,
Yep.
Mrs. Scott,
I have,
yes.
I have a discussion.
Yes, love that at 9.
Steve Duvall is in my ear saying, don't use the E&D money. Because that's what Steve Duvall always says. And so I always hear him whenever we try to use extra E&D money. And yet, I'm gonna tell Steve to be quiet, because I don't want to roll out a curriculum that was discussed to be an elementary school. I understand the differences and the changes that were made. I kind of wish the pre-K discussion was done a little earlier, and I'm glad it was done when it was done, to say that let's pull out the pre-K from the new curriculum. And I understand the fifth grade is kind of a conversation of budget driver in addition to logistic driver because of schedule change and the principal change and wanting to do that the right way. And with all of that said, it would be very poor form to not use the additional $69,000 and change to exclude one grade level from the process. So I support using the $69,000 additional E&D funds. Sorry, Steve.
Steve quit, so it's okay.
It is, and he doesn't come back.
Ms. Stout?
Just on that line, I think that when I think about rolling out the curriculum, I do support it all being done at once because I can't see with professional development, that would be really a nightmare to do haphazardly. So I think that's the best choice.
Mrs. Gaines?
And I think for me, that would have been the only way I would have supported coming out of E&D, because I've already kind of been thinking through this, and there was a very strong case made tonight. So we've supported it, and for myself, that's where it needed to come from. So that's my statement.
And she's sticking to it.
I am sticking to it.
I've got nothing else, you know. I think I've ticked off enough people tonight. Got myself cornered right in there, but, you know, it's life. So I think we're going to be looking for a motion. Mrs. Scott?
I was just gonna dive in, but I was waiting to make sure nobody else was holding
No,
up
he's
their
busy
hands.
down there. Don't worry about him.
Not I.
He's looking for spelling errors.
I was looking at the part where it says school committee salary secret. I really like that. And I
I'd
wondered
really
where-
like to know what that is.
And I'd like to know where that 3,000 went.
Mrs.
that's interesting.
Mrs. Cernio, you have a comment, question, or concern about the budget tonight?
What, so what I would recommend is that we vote the line item cost center budget as well as the assessment.
Okay,
Ooh, that's a lot to ask me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
you
Madam
brought it
Chair,
up. Mrs.
I
Scott.
move to approve the FY21 budget by cost center stating 1,000 district leadership and administration salary and wages, the amount of $741,302. Cost center 1,000 district leadership and administration expenses, $371,295. Cost center 2,000 instruction salaries and wages, $19,296,585. 2,000 instruction expenses, $1,335,514. 3,000 other school services salaries and wages, $1,022,382. 3,000 other school services expenses, $1,799,031. 4,000 operations and maintenance salaries and wages, $1,508,000, nope, yes, $1,508,169. Don't stop, just keep going. 4,000 operations and maintenance expenses, $1,894,577. 5,000 fixed charges, $7,742,699. 7,000 capital, $355,000. 8,000 debt retirement and service, $2,110,916. 9,000 programs with other school districts for $3,557,153 for a grand total general fund budget of $41,734,623.
I would second that.
Okay, I'm gonna roll call on that, or no? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And therefore, Madam Chair,
Mrs. Scott?
I would like to also move that the FY '21 assessment for the town of Harwich is $27,272,527. Town of Chatham's total FY '21 draft assessment, or excuse me, '21 assessment, $9,053,203. for a total FY '21 assessment of $36,325,730.
And
The E&D.
the E&D.
And using a additional or total E&D? Using E&D, using funds from our E&D in the amount of $550,000 and $189,809 to support our budget.
Second?
I would second that also.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And I just thought of one other question that came up before, and a point of
You
clarification.
just want to keep going.
I know.
I just want to go to the grocery store. I'll see you there.
The school committee, we present the E&D, and it's approved at town meeting by both of the towns, when the budget is passed. We can't use or spend money out of E&D until we go to the towns and get permission from the towns again. So I think that it's important for towns to know that we have that money, but we just can't spend it. We have to go and present a need. So let's just say, something came up and we needed to, I don't know what, I don't know. But the towns would have to approve additional spending out of E&D.
Well, Town of Chatham really likes us right now, so that'll go over well. All right, moving on. Katie, I'm sorry, but clerical substitute hourly rate increase? Katie, Attorney Over Business Manager. No, we're going over that.
When we changed the sub-rates, and I gave it on the spreadsheet to everybody, we forgot to include the clerical substitutes. So it would be the same rate that's highlighted in yellow, that's on your sheet. We just missed, so because it lists, instructional assistants, cafeterias, but we missed clerical. So I'm just requesting that we approve a clerical substitute rate.
Okay, is there a motion, or do you have a motion in mind? Okay, does everyone understand what she's asking?
I don't know how to phrase it.
So we need to have a motion to approve it's the highlighted ones, right?
Yep.
The clerical
Substitute hourly rate.
substitute
Be the
hourly
same
rate as
as?
presented.
To be the same as the others?
Yes.
I move to approve the clerical substitute rates to be the same as the instructional assistant and cafeteria, including van drivers and monitors, as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Carpenter, we're gonna skip over that creations of new, taking off of non-essential items this evening. And we do have a vote required for a second reading of file IHBA programs for students with disabilities, as you will find in your folder. Someone from Policy Subcommittee wanna present that one? Joe does.
I spoke to it last week
Great.
and, last meeting, and would reiterate simply that what we're affirming is that the district will comply with relevant federal and state laws and provide IEP, individual education programs to all enrolled students in accordance with the binding statutes.
Great,
Which
thank you,
in
Joe.
fact we do.
Yep, any questions or discussion at this point? This is the second reading. Or a motion, I'll take that.
I move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Nays? Motion carries. And Dr. Carpenter, a brief discussion about the international student trips over April vacation.
Why don't we just,
Or we can just bypass that.
we'll lump that into a
Perfect.
update on coronavirus. But after, let's talk about the easy thing.
Yeah.
So Seth stole my thunder. There was the Council for the Aging special town meeting that Chatham had, as Seth mentioned. They, the folks that were there voted roughly 2-1 in favor of funding a feasibility study to look at the parcel of land along stepping stones. I had the town reached out to the school district asking if they can have entities come onto the property and do some of the preliminary studies that you would do for a, for a feasibility study. So I said, sure, I'm going to have the engineers come on. It's over, out the, out. It's not in where our students are. So they will start that process to do the feasibility study to help inform the conversation at the making meeting. And I know that there were other people that were first person in the gym. I was in the auditorium because I am no longer a Chatham taxpayer, so I was with a couple other people in the auditorium. But was watching it live. But I don't know if people have anything else to report on what the conversation was.
Ms. Scott?
I'm glad it's on the agenda, sort of, because actually I'm glad it's not on the agenda as a discussion item, because I think that what was done at town meeting and what we've done prior to this was all we need to do. I don't think our role is to continue to have conversations at every one of our meetings as to whether or not we did the right thing by voting the way we did 2 weeks ago. I was doing just a whole lot of debriefing after town meeting, and I was insulted at town meeting. I was very much bothered by a lot of the comments that were made. There was comments made that we did not make a decision on our own. We had the selectmen glaring at us, and therefore we were not able to have an honest conversation and debate about it. My husband actually tried to make light of the situation and say that I've been glaring at her for 20 years and it's never worked. I'm not sure what they did to her, because it doesn't work. And I actually take great offense to the public comment that was made at our meeting today. I honestly felt threatened that if we don't follow what a group of people are asking us to follow, we won't have support of our budget. I very, very, very offended by that. There was also comments saying that as a school committee, we were not supportive of the seniors. And I very much love our school committee, and I do want to take a look and say that we are not all young parents on this committee. And I just will leave it at that. But I think we are very well represented on our committee. And so for the people from the town of Chatham to say that we don't support the seniors and that we as a committee are a part of the me generation and not the giving generation, and I just kind of cocked my head to that. I had a lot of thoughts. I just kind of debriefed everything, so I don't even want to look at what I had written out on my phone because I was so angry after town meeting. Not because of the vote, because I think the vote is fine. Town of Chatham can move forward with the feasibility study, and if I personally, as a Chatham taxpayer, I did not agree with it, and I voted as such. And as a school committee member, it's really no harm to us for them to have a feasibility study on that piece of property. And after that feasibility study is done, then they can the town can come to us and say, this is what we found in the feasibility study. Would you consider giving up some of the school leased land back to the town so that this can happen? Because we as an entire town, not just a group of petitioners, feel like this is the best site. And some will say that our vote at the last meeting was premature because we didn't have enough information, and I disagree with that. I think the 8 of us had a very thoughtful and thorough discussion about all of that, so I feel that what we did at the time was appropriate, and we shared our opinions, and we move on. But I very much disagree with Mr. Taylor speaking and saying that we should have a conversation about what we're going to do to move forward, because I feel like our job is done at this point. We discussed it prior to the special town meeting. We expressed our opinions. We expressed our concerns. they were not necessarily listened to by the petitioners and the people that attended special town meeting, which is fine, that's the way it works. And so once the feasibility is complete, then if something comes of that feasibility study, then I feel that it should be a part of our reports and discussions on our agenda to have another conversation. So I want this to be the end of it at our level until anybody comes back to us specifically with a request. Not just to have a discussion about it, but with actual requests, with actual backup from town meeting vote. So I did not like town meeting personally. I felt attacked.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. Sheehan?
I said I wasn't going to say anything, but I want to say, number one, I do support exactly what you said. So I won't rehash that because I've got it here. But I will say that I have been contacted by people who want the opposite. They want to stay at 1610. They feel very comfortable with the design they've seen. I've been invited to several meetings now. So I've got new friends, too.
It's better than enemies.
Well, I think they saw me as kindred spirit there. And those 521, however many people signed that petition, weren't necessarily in favor of stepping stones. They simply wanted the democratic process to work. I've heard people tell me that as well. And I will say, I still go back to the idea that our job really does center around the children. And if we don't pay attention to what they need, because I never heard Saturday one mention as to what the kids need. I heard, I need, we need. I didn't hear, here's what the kids need, and here's why they need it. And as far as safety goes, there was one question asked, and I just want to clarify it. A quick question to, I believe it was the fire chief. Is there do you need to be there for the escape route? Does the escape route go through stepping stones? And the answer to that, quite frankly, is nobody knows. It depends on what the situation is. I have been in that situation. I know you don't necessarily follow the route that has been planned because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've got to go wherever you can go. And the teachers will lead you there, the administrators will lead you there, but to say there's a pat route just is not so. And again, you've got to look at the safety of the kids. And the kids going through a senior citizen parking lot, I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable at Chatham Market. I mean, it's an uncomfortable, yes. It's the kids' safety is what counts for me. And so I'm only speaking for myself, and to be threatened, I'm not pleased with that at all. That's not the way I play the game.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm Joe, and then
Tina. I want to make sure we are able to leave by the time the lights go out.
Oh, we're good.
So I will
We're good.
refrain from commenting till another time. But am I right in thinking that 3 Chatham members of the school committee attended the town meeting? I didn't, I was working.
Yes.
And
Highlight of my Saturday.
And I've seen some of the meeting on Channel 18, not all. Did anyone from the Chatham side of the school committee speak during the meeting? And I ask partly because I'm wondering if we actually did intrude in a political way as citizens or not. Did my colleagues from Chatham speak at the town meeting?
We did not speak.
Okay.
We in the, I think, and I don't know if I speak for Joanne and Nancy, but in the effort of just being presented to discuss the item, make a vote on the item simply for something that isn't really relevant at this time until a feasibility study is done and the town comes together and decides what they want to do when it's a real vote. There was no reason for us to get up and talk. There were some folks that did stand up and speak in support of the school committee's decision, in support of a COA in town, and then in that respect, probably for the 1610 as well, but no, we did not stand up and speak. There wasn't, you know, I kind of kept waiting to think or see if there was an opportunity or a good opportunity to sit up, but it really would not have benefited the situation at all. We've had 2 meetings, very clear. We had a vote. There was really not much more to say. They can stand up and say what they think they heard, but it's a public meeting on television, so.
Thank you.
Ms. Games?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment, because I have done my homework and research since the last couple of meetings. And part of my research was reading the coverage from the Chronicle and the Times, which took me to Facebook, and I read the comments.
Ooh, don't go there.
Don't go there.
And, well, I
There's a
am
chat
going to go,
room,
I am
too.
going to go there because it mirrored a little bit of what we heard this evening, the threats. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I understand people have passion about this, but to attack a collective body and even a couple of people sitting around this table, I just thought it was uncalled for. And I just want to, say that I think it's just inappropriate. Period.
Thank you, Ms. Games. And I think, I agree with Nancy and Joanne. I took away everything that they did from the meeting, and like I said, you know, I just, as the chair, I did not feel that it was appropriate or necessary for me to stand up and speak on behalf of us, because we already had. And it really was a non-issue at that point. It's the town's issue, really, and we're representatives of a district. So I think speaking regarding tonight, people in town wishing we're not involved in this, you know, comments like that, they're just not necessary. I mean, schools committee shouldn't interfere. Well, we're not interfering. We're taking a vote on a piece of property that is leased to us. It's quite simple and legal. So it's not an interference. Cautioning us to not engage with selectmen. Give me a break. I mean, even someone who spoke at the meeting on Saturday at 3 o'clock, you know, that we were intimidated. And as Nancy will say, I don't think anyone here is easily intimidated, and it's not about intimidation. It's about education, having constructive conversations, supporting your district, and doing what's best for the students. And that's pretty much it. I think we are all good, solid citizens here, recognizing the desire of the town. There's no doubt in that. And I think that we are not judicial activists. And we don't need to restrict ourselves to just educational needs, which was another statement tonight. That's just not appropriate. So I think for now, we're good. We've tabled it, and at the time when Chatham decides what they're doing, they'll have their feasibility studies, and they want to come back and present as a whole about the location. That's absolutely fine, but for now, we've done our job, and I thank everyone for your constructive contribution to it, and we will move forward from there.
Shall I continue my superintendent's report?
Yes, Dr. Carpenter.
All right. So how do I best want to start this?
I'm not sure, because
So I first of all want to express a great appreciation to Katie for being able to pick up the budget piece here the last few days, and for Mark, you know, and what you've done on the elementary curriculum piece, because I have fallen into this abyss that I did not ever envision, which is coronavirus. And I wish that everyone would just step back and pull out their Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and look at the front page or the cover. Don't panic, because even while we have been sitting here in this meeting, panic is just setting in everywhere. You know, so quite literally, while we've been sitting here, the governor of Pennsylvania has declared state of emergency in Pennsylvania, closing all schools, daycares, and daycares and gyms in Montgomery County, which is sort of the northwestern suburb of Philadelphia, where a lot of the biotech areas are.
Oh, well, we don't need them.
And I worry that as a society, we're reacting to an extreme that we potentially cripple what we very much need to have in place right now. And, so to kind of put things into context over the last few days, we had a recommendation by the CDC that came out last week that international travel for colleges and high schools should be curtailed for the rest of the school year. And I get it. So I have worked with Rachel Barnes and Dustin Burns and their trips that we're going to travel. Rachel's was a trip to London. We pulled the plug on that. Dustin's to Costa Rica. The challenge becomes, families have put in deposits. These companies have, they have, with regard to each of the trips, I know for EF tours, we had an option to go Labor Day. The biology guy in me who's, studied pandemics in his past is like, Labor Day is a little optimistic, folks, and we might not have a vaccine. I'm sure we'll have a vaccine that's going to come along, but they won't have time to ramp it up so it's generally available. So let's look same time next year. Those kids are 8th graders and 9th graders. That was the London trip, so that works for them. But we have some seniors, a small number of seniors that are going to be out money or needing to potentially leave college to come back to take advantage of a trip to Costa Rica. So we'll have to, we're going to have to work through those logistics because I think these travel companies, I really don't think have the means to go refund some of the monies that they've already spent to set up. And we only had 2 trips. There are a lot of districts that have, far more trips and, a lot of them, on the senior end. So I had started putting out emails every Friday, and I will have one tomorrow, and probably the first line of it is going to be "Don't panic." Just trying to remind people, what we have to think through. I have received, not many, but I have received 2 emails from parents and 1 from staff, strongly encouraging me as superintendent to close schools now. And I understand where each one's coming from, but I also need them to understand what happens if we close school. It's like we shut down our 2 towns and the doctor or nurse or emergency responder or the healthcare worker at Liberty Commons in Chatham, may need to be now home with their child. And what have we done to sort of mitigate this concern about coronavirus? It's like we potentially are handicapping ourselves, and I'm worried, even from the news, because just before we walked in here, the governor of Ohio has closed all schools for the next 3 weeks. And I do worry that we're kind of, I understand the public safety piece, and I think that we have this level of panic that's setting in. While we were sitting here, my sister texted, because now that with the state of emergency in Pennsylvania, she went to Wegmans and the shelves are bare. She sent me this picture of down the pasta aisle and there's nothing left. Of course, my mom's texting in saying, she's got plenty of egg noodles at her house. Yeah, and of course, my mom calls this morning. Sorry, Mom, for saying this in public, but she's calling me this morning because she was at Bridge Group yesterday, and the ladies are telling her they're concerned because she's been reading a book from the library. So my mom's calling me, her biologist son, asking, should I wear gloves when I'm reading the book?
Does she know you're sitting in a library right now?
And I was like, Mom, I would be far more concerned about the germs exchanged at your Bridge Group than reading the book. But but we're, we're kind of all over the place, including the way Massachusetts is reacting to this on an educational front. So I put something out to our staff, what I call it Wednesday morning or Tuesday night. So it was in the wee hours of Wednesday morning to just sort of share that, hey, the governor has put out this state of emergency. This is what it means, and here's how it should inform our decision. So we had a long meeting prior to coming into this with our admin team as we're bracing for the what ifs. And, some of the things are, part of the governor's declaration for his executive office departments, which includes the Department of Education, not schools at the local level, but folks that would work at Department of Education and the highways and this, that, and the other would all be under that executive branch. That we should conduct business, do our regular business, but just avoid, these discretionary gatherings. So on our end, it's, we have been pulling the plug on things that involve outsiders coming into our buildings, but, focusing on, so an example would be, yesterday there was supposed to be a middle school winter sports award ceremony, which you'd have the kids and you'd have parents and potentially grandparents all coming in, and we said, okay, let's do an award ceremony if we're going to do one, and just have it, for our students and staff, that we can control that one right now. So, things like Harwich Elementary's Shamrock Shimmy that would happen this weekend, that again has our students, but also has people coming into the building to just say, we can't do that right now. We have to kind of do some things differently. One of the things I shared in the email is that that the state, or our Commissioner of Education, has relaxed the 180-day mandate for the schools, which I understand. I'm a little dismayed that there hasn't been encouraging schools to come up with plans to provide remote services, because again, if the more we can provide continuity for our kids, the better off our entire society is going to be at trying to maintain some level of normalcy for our kids, but also to, I would prefer, I'm hoping that, whatever households have, the scientists that are working on a cure are not having to be home taking care of their children, or that, that there's something, something that the schools in those districts can be doing, to support them. So we have all these things. So while the commissioner is not encouraging remote education, I feel that as our district, our taxpayers have supported us. We have one-to-one with our, at our middle school, although the students don't have the laptops or their Chromebooks home yet. I guess maybe I should foreshadow, but we have the ability to send a one-to-one device to every middle schooler. Our high schoolers have them. And, and I have talked with our admin team, I've talked with our union reps, that, that we would go and, that middle school and high school would continue along a sort of daily flow. We can flow with our daily schedule where the kids would be spending time working. They wouldn't be sitting at the computer all the time, but there would be, here's a little lesson that the teacher's doing, and here's the activity, and that we can try to provide that continuity if we have to get to that place. I've also shared with the admin team, my own superintendent non-negotiables, and that's that, we have roughly 1,900 kids in this school district, and I want to make sure if we have to be there, that we're having a one-to-one conversation with every child every day. That we, I think one of the things that we do well at Monomoy is that connectedness, and that I don't want to see some situation where remote learning becomes a disconnected thing. And I think that connectedness can actually make the remote learning more successful if we have to get there. At the elementary level, the elementary teachers, we're working together. We anticipate we'll do what we can to ensure that every elementary family has a computer per family, but we don't imagine that at the elementary level that there would be an exclusive providing the curriculum by way of the computer, so that we're going to have to come up with some packets that we can deliver, so we have we've been thinking through this. We have our own buses. We can go and we will be prepared to make school lunches and breakfasts, and for our kids that are on free and reduced lunch, our staff has already worked out a bus route plan and worked it with the bus company that we can go door to door like the milkman used to do, and
Meals on
we can
Wheels.
leave the meal on the doorstep each day. So I want it to be clear with our staff that we as a district have a commitment for 180 days of service, support, and learning for our kids, and we're going to honor that 180-day commitment. Oddly, I may have to close for 5 days before I can do that, because the commissioner won't count those days until we exhaust our 5 snow days. So it's some of the bizarre logistics of all of this. So I do want to emphasize that two things. First, I think that we have the opportunity here to have some good come out of what could be a bad situation. We have the opportunity for our students, particularly our students that are in grades 5 through 12, they in their lifetimes will have to take a class or two or many classes online, and we're going to have the ability to have them experience that now. Our teachers will have an opportunity to learn to use technology a lot more than they've been forced to do in the past. That's a good. So I think our staff and our students have opportunities to learn here, which is a great thing. And our I look at the elementary level. Our elementary teachers, the plan is to have our elementary teachers by grade level, Chatham and Harwich elementary teachers, working together to develop a unified curriculum at the same time. So again, we're getting our elementary teachers to work far more together if we have to go to a situation where we're having to be remote. So I want to emphasize that there can be some really good things to come out of a bad situation, and I also want to acknowledge it's going to be imperfect. I mean, if remote learning was better than classroom learning, we would just be doing remote learning. It's going to be imperfect. It's not going to be. It's not going to be. It's not going to be ideal, but we're going to try to make the best out of it. We also had a long conversation with our group on how would we handle our extreme special needs children. And I anticipate that what we'll be doing is we will remain open for our little pockets of classrooms, which pretty much amounts to be one classroom per building for students who have extreme needs, so that we're providing them and their with the things that we can't do remotely. So we'll find a way to limp on. I am not optimistic that between now and the next time we have a school committee meeting that we will be continuing to stay open, because I suspect my gut.
A lot of negatives in there.
Yeah,
You
well,
heard-
my-
you heard
my-
that right.
My gut is that while there has not been a confirmed case, at least before I walked into this meeting, on Cape Cod, that will likely change, and I suspect that, that it wasn't school superintendents in Ohio that closed school for 3 weeks. It was, powers that be above them. So I'm a little worried, given the way, I almost look at this as it's like a microcosm of what happens during a snow day. It's like where the superintendents start calling each other. It's like,
What are you gonna do?
Are you closing
What are you gonna
school? Are you closing school? And then once one of them closes school, there's this pressure that the other's going to close school.
It's literally a snowball effect.
And, so at the moment, I feel like I'm the parent now waiting for the phone call.
So bottom line, timely question, what's the likelihood that school will close?
Well, if you look at the map of the United States right now and all the states that are lit up, it's getting,
Yeah, so I would say, I would say, if a case happens in our district, we have a plan in place, and we'll follow our local departments of health and the state DPH.
Yes.
I don't know until it happens, but I'm also a realist on how many things closed while we've been sitting here. About every other second, I'm getting another ding coming in that there's a new email of another district that's closed. And again, I worry how many of them are closing out of, there's not a case there, but they're closing because the one next to them closed, or the one next to them, them
well,
closed.
the Cape is unique though, too, where, maybe the coronavirus doesn't swim, I'm just saying. Maybe we're good. Right, can't get over the bridge.
We're in our bubble.
So maybe we're fine.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think the bridges aren't going to protect us on this one.
No. I'd like to say, though, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that we're not panicking, that what we're doing is we're giving very thoughtful process to all this, that we're trying to do what's responsible and encouraging other people to do what's responsible. I have a great little story that my grandson in 4th grade, very little, I had supper with this weekend, and I always ask them, well, what they're doing in school. They're like, oh, God, we know what the question is. And he said, I didn't know I was supposed to wet my hands before I put soap on it to wash. And I'm paying attention because I didn't actually know that either. But the school nurse came in and taught the class how to wash the hands with wetting the hands, soaping it all around, all the things we've seen on TV, and singing happy birthday twice. And I'm like, here is a practical thing that this is not going to be the last time in their life they'll need this. The flu every year. It's a very important thing that they need, and it was handled in a way that, I asked him if people were concerned about this. He just thought it was interesting and something he could use a lot. So I'd like to just kind of have it on that level. We're going to do what's practical.
So, I want to emphasize the commissioner has stated that, if we had to close for 3 weeks like Ohio, that it would be okay for us to just say, okay, you have your 5 snow days, and then those other 10 days are lost. I don't want them to be lost. And I think it would be doing wrong by our kids and wrong by our taxpayers, and in my humble opinion, wrong in terms of us playing our role in a otherwise public health crisis.
Got a vacation.
So I was just clarifying with our staff that we have a 180-day commitment. We're going to live up to it. And I really appreciate that the MRAA is behind that.
Go us, go Monomoy, go Dr. Carpenter.
That's it for me.
Team learning. Woo! All
There's
right.
there's a phone call tomorrow morning, 8:30, with the commissioner and DPH.
That'll be neat.
As I said, not optimistic.
All right, so, thank you very much for all of your due diligence and all your time put into this. I think that the audience at home appreciates it, and we certainly appreciate that everything's being done. Last item on the agenda would be the declaration of surplus. Mrs. Scott.
I move to declare a surplus from Monomoy Regional Middle School, room E206, two black office chairs, one multi-office chair, one blue wooden armed office swivel chair, from CES headroom, tech closet, 5 HP LaserJet printers, 5 keyboards, 22 power cables, 17 AC adapters, 2 amplifiers, 1 iPad, 9 Kindles, 2 projectors, 11 laptops, and 28 Ethernet cables.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Noes? Motion carries. Presentation of the warrants, and at this time, is there anyone who'd like to participate in public comment? Speak limited to 5 minutes.
This should be renamed Charles's public comment.
Charles's minute.
No, Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich, Mass. Obviously, I'm not in panic because I attended tonight despite my age and being in the critical
Good for you, common
category
sense. I love that.
And don't worry about getting to the market. The toilet paper was gone this afternoon, the hand wipes were gone, and
I heard an
it's
antics
just
going
not going to be, we should have rationed.
I just want steak and chicken.
As an individual taxpayer, I just want to support and commend the superintendent for his commitment to a 180-day education for our students, regardless of what happens, that commitment. I want to continue to commend the work of the administrative staff and curriculum matters. Again, tremendous piece of work I saw demonstrated that went into everything discussed on curriculum this evening. And I'm glad that you did make your supportive comments eventually, because I was getting concerned for a while that this team, and not just the team, but the staff of the district would be greatly demoralized if we tasked them with something. They put so much work and effort into it, and felt like it was totally questioned after all. I just worried about for the future how many people would take up that role. I was sitting on my hands during the first public comment period because I totally agree with Mrs. Scott's analysis of comments that were made this evening and the comments, and I agree from my perspective with the other people on the committee who commented this evening on the issue, on the COA issue. But for years I counseled students the words of Thomas Jefferson, which was, when angry, count to 10. When you're really angry, count to 100. If you've gotten to 100, Mr. Gruska says, you just keep counting until you're not angry. And I couldn't get myself not angry by the time public comment hearing was up. So I didn't want to get up and throw this whole meeting out of whack with a confrontation within the public at your meeting. And finally, something did come up, or something was mentioned in the discussion on the curriculum about people lobbying, teachers lobbying on the point. And I guess I felt the need to remind the committee, but you probably don't need reminding, about chain of command and the importance of chain of command. I've been the victim many, many times of someone going around the chain of command and hearing from a level that I shouldn't have heard from initially. So I see chain of command in the school system of the teacher, the principal, central administration, the superintendent, and then the school committee. And if that doesn't resolve it, you can always go to the Department of Ed. But did a lot of work in teaching people following the chain of command and how to deal at each level. So I would hope, I'm just expressing the thought, and you already know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but when you get a call and when you get approached by someone and it's a matter that someone else is really responsible for in the system initially, it's great to ask them if they've gone through the appropriate chain of command. So you get a call from someone who's got a complaint about a teacher, before you respond, did you talk to the teacher? And if the answer is yes, then that wasn't resolved at that level. Did you talk to the principal? Have you gone all the way up through the superintendent and the superintendent wasn't able to resolve your issue and concern? I'm here. Now I'm ready to be able to take that in and process that and make them. There are many things that are directly your role, and the citizens and taxpayers come to you, we've elected you to do that. But you know, if it's a curriculum matter, have you gone through, again, have you talked to your principal about your concern? Have you talked to the curriculum director about your concern? That didn't resolve it, have you talked to the superintendent? Don't bother someone higher up the line. Give the person who's immediately responsible a first opportunity to respond. That doesn't mean you're going to get the matter resolved. If you don't, and I think that's all of us, all of you in the chain of command have that responsibility. I had a best superintendent I ever worked for. A parent would call him with a concern about me or something in my school. He would say, have you spoken to Mr. Gruska about that? And if the answer was no, he said, well, I can't help you right now. You need to speak to Mr. Gruska about that. Once you've spoken to him, if you haven't resolved a concern, now I'm ready to hear and listen to that. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but something that all of us are probably does well to be reminded of once in a while, so that people don't get the feeling of being run around, gone around. And there may be some people in the room that may have felt gone around when they hear a comment like that and see something getting dealt with at a higher level and blindsiding them. Maybe that happened, maybe it didn't, but that's a very important thing in the school system, and from my perspective, is not people not getting blindsided. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Thank you, Charles, as usual.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. You forgot a second.
Second?